Good morning, everyone. If you can hear me, type in good morning. What is up, Cameron, Sonia, Stephen, Julia, good morning. John, good morning. Owen, Ariana, good morning. Reese, what is up? Hannah, whoa, what's up, folks? Hey, we have another exciting class today. It's funny, just minutes before we were starting, I was setting up and I was thinking, we've been doing some good high-level philosophizing. Curtis, what is up? And so I was thinking to myself, man, this is just like, it's KPU, right? It's a polytechnic university. But you folks, I think, are being exposed to some really good philosophical, training here, I feel. I figured wherever I am, I'm always going to bring it. And I'm thinking, wow, does the outside world know that we're having, I think, a top level class? It's unfolding really well so far. And remember, I can't do it without you. With that in mind, I just want to start off by saying a big props to everyone who's shown up, who's putting the work, doing the readings. Nav, welcome. And who's like it's a mind-bending adventure, right? You understand? Like you have to have an open mind, and at the same time, you have to have rigor. Not so open mind that your brain spills out and just falls out and anything goes. There are correct answers to these questions that we're asking, but nevertheless, especially like last week, for instance, I was asking a lot of you. So folks who showed up and worked with me during this exercise that we did last week in phaneroscopy, and Owen says, of course, is reshaping my life. Heavy stuff, fun nonetheless. You can't ask for better than that as far as I'm concerned, right? It's like, what more would you want, right? And it's making you smarter in a way, I'm hoping. I mean, philosophy, when you work really hard at it, makes you smarter in a way that affects every other aspect of your life. You can't help but think that it improves your job prospects, your prospects of being a better partner, a better parent, a better friend, a better citizen. Yeah, I just feel like every minute spent together is just, it's a minute where I feel, wow, I'm alive and it's really worthwhile. And I feel like, they say hit 2 birds with 1 stone. I feel like I'm hitting 50 birds with 1 stone whenever we do things right. I feel like so many things are happening. And so thanks to everyone for joining in. And it requires, we need to have a shared love. Remember we talked about at the beginning, Peirce talks about how science isn't so much a body of knowledge as it is a thirst for knowledge, right? Well, same thing with philosophy, right? It isn't so much a body of this kind of frozen knowledge, all these old dead folks who've said stuff. There's very living philosophers. You're speaking to one right now. It's a love. It's a love for wisdom. It's a love for this kind of thing that we do. And so thank you, everyone. I just want to share some love here to all the class. I think you're doing great so far, and I'm really happy. Let's keep it up. All right, cool. That little moment of sappy love to the side. We're doing Philosophy of Science Part 2. We're midway through a 3-parter in Philosophy of Science. It's a big deal. This is a tough subject. The next thing we'll be spending something close to 3 weeks on is going to be logic. I appreciate that, Arjun. Me too. The next thing we'll be spending a lot of time on will be logic. We'll spend 2 weeks on logic, and we'll preface that with 1 week in philosophy of logic. Peirce considered logic really important, and it is a very important core of his system. But remember that I've tried to structure the sequence in which we encounter all of these different branches in a way that makes sense. So the stuff we'll do in logic will make a lot more sense given everything that we'll have done up to that time. So now we're at Philosophy of Science Part 2. Last week we didn't even develop any definition or understanding of what a sign was, apart from maybe an intuitive one. I think we started getting a glimpse of what it would mean. Today, we're actually going to start defining the sign. Next week, we're going to classify different varieties of signs. So if you can think of it like this way, last week, what we did was preparatory work for getting the raw materials. This week, we're going to build a model of what a sign is. And next week, we're going to refine that model in an insane level of detail so as to track different varieties of signs and the way they act. And the way I want to do this today is I want to start by looking back at last time what we did. When we were doing phaneroscopy, we were trying to look at, Peirce, remember what he said about Kant. He used to study Kant like a lot. Kant's job was, in epistemology, was to try to find the necessary conditions for knowledge, like what are the things that have to be in place for a knower to know. We kind of did that. Peirce thinks he's doing it better than Kant. I'm tempted to agree. And so what we did we were trying to unearth what must be the characters of the signs of an intelligence that is capable of learning from experience. And Peirce called this a scientific intelligence because for him it's all on a spectrum. You're a scientist the moment you're alive, for crying out loud, right? Like the moment you're trying to figure stuff out, and then all you do is you refine that and you collaborate with others. So we'll pick up where we were last time. And so we're talking about learning from experience. I'm going to bring up a topic that is on every undergraduate's mind, which is the idea of an illusion, which is a theme that we get a lot, that we've inherited from Descartes to kind of shape the agenda for philosophy. If you go before Descartes, by the way, in the medieval philosophy, they weren't too concerned with trying to quote unquote prove the external world, right? This was not a concern for all of philosophy, basically. They got a little glimpse of it in skeptical philosophers in ancient times, and then Descartes made it his main course. But in Peirce, what you have is a game changer in terms of what place that ought to occupy on our list of priorities as philosopher, and also how we ought to tackle that question. So what I'll do is I'll use that concern, which you're probably more familiar with, as a way to unpack what it means to be a sign and what it means to be what it means to learn from signs. So we'll look at learning as distinguishing illusion from reality, and we'll tie that up with some stuff that we did in epistemology a few weeks ago. And then that'll give us preparatory ground for transitioning quite smoothly to the triadic model of the sign. And when I mean model, I mean that in a strict diagrammatic sense. We're going to make a model, and we're going to see a good model and a bad model, and we'll understand what are the differences between the two. And then finally, we'll look at some nuances, some important nuances to keep in mind, because the model only works if you keep in mind a variety of things. It's a good model. It's arguably the best model that anyone's ever come up with. But to be properly understood, you have to bear in mind a lot of nuances. So we're going to take our understanding of Peirce's semiotic to the next level, not the kind of level that you hear about, you know, if you've had casual conversations, if you've browsed the internet, or if you've taken other humanities courses and you've heard some prof just mention it very briefly. In this course, it's really our main dish. It's something that we're going to spend a lot of time on. Then that's going to allow us to cross some items on our main document. We've already got some items crossed from last week. We're going to cross some more. And I feel like that's a nice sense of accomplishment. It's very tangible. We're making progress. I hope you can feel that you're smarter at week 5 than you were at week 1. And I get the sense already from some reports from folks that that's what's happening. And as I read your entries, I can get the sense that that's what's happening. But really knocking off the items is a very clear-cut sense of saying, look, if nothing else, I know what these terms mean. I can unpack them as arguments and a set of clusters of concerns and so on. So that's how we're going to spend our time. All right. Is that good, everyone? It looks like how we're going to budget our time. Is everyone good to go? Good to go. Loving it. And as usual, forgive me. Thanks, Ariana. Forgive me if I, once in a while you hear me chew. I'm eating. You should eat as well. That way you don't have to be impolite. You're on mute. I need energy for this stuff. It's hard. And besides, it's not like I'm going to wake up so early to start eating before we do our class. Besides, I also want energy throughout the entire class too. So I got to time it properly. Oh, that feels good. Here we go. All right, so let's get started. What did we do last time? Last time we were, if you remember, trying to do this. So we started with this question, which we didn't answer. So what is a sign? But what we had was just a glimpse that this was an important question, because all reasoning is an interpretation of signs of some kind, right? And by all reasoning, Peirce has in mind not just very strict logical reasoning, but all sorts of reasoning. When you're guessing, when you're trying to figure stuff out. What you learn in formal logic is one end of that spectrum when you sort of regiment the signs that you use in a very strict way. But all reasoning, and he means the all here, all reasoning is an interpretation of signs of some sort. And so what we were trying to do was to investigate what must be the characters of all signs used by a scientific intelligence. And he himself puts these quotation marks because he's aware he's using this term in a very idiosyncratic way that's unique to him, right? All signs used by a scientific intelligence, that is to say, by an intelligence capable of learning by experience. And you can gauge why we've moved away from the word science, scientific. Amoeba, right, can learn from experience to a certain degree. Anything that could learn from experience, according to Peirce, is an intelligence that's a scientific intelligence, right? So when he uses that, I remember being at a conference once and being really upset at this term, and all the Peircean scholars around me were like, come on, go with it. But I'm like, you have to understand, for the outside world, when they hear the word scientific intelligence, they're thinking people in lab coats. And when they think what must be the characters of signs used by scientific intelligence, they're thinking chemists looking at the periodic table of elements on a board or something. That's what they're thinking. That is not what Peirce has in mind. It's something drastically different. You've been exposed to that last time because the first thing we did was we looked at that big purple sheet, right? And we were doing something completely different, right? And so that's what we did last time. That was our goal. And so here you have it. What must be the characters of all signs used by an intelligence capable of learning by experience? And what we learned last time was, if you're going to have an intelligence capable of learning by experience, well, guess what? You're going to need an experience of some sort. You have to have an experience somewhere in the mix for that even to be a thing, right? So what you need are, at minimum, experiences. So here's an experience, right? Something presents itself and it looks this way. In this case, I believe this is a river in Winnipeg or something. I got this on the internet. So it's a freshwater river, right? So something has to, some quality must appear in some sense. You have to have an experience. You're not going to be an intelligence capable of learning by experience if you have no experiences. So we need experiences. Luckily, the world provides us with some, so there's not much of a problem there. The moment you wake up, experiences resume. When you fall asleep, they stop and they resume every day. It's called your consciousness. So you don't have to worry about that. That's kind of taken care of for you. If you can even formulate any kind of concern, you're having an experience already. So something has to happen, and it has to have, whatever is going to happen is going to be that. So let's just pause at that level, right? Whatever's going to happen. So first of all, let's just agree on that. If you're going to be an intelligence capable of learning from experience, you need an experience. Do we agree? There's got to be experiences somehow, somewhere in the mix. You need experiences. Can we agree on that? If you agree, type in yeah or agree. We're going to go just really, again, step by step, right? Because we want to make sure we got this right, that we converge on these secure conclusions. Whatever's the bloody experience, we agree it'll have a certain quality. It'll look this way. It'll be that, not something else. We agree it has to have a certain quality. Experiences without a quality. It's like, that doesn't make any sense. An experience with no quality, right? Whatever it is, it's going to have a quality. Do we agree on that? I'm going to type the word quality in here. Yeah. And there's no constraint on what we mean by quality. Like, it looks this way, right? That kind of stuff. And that's great. And that would be what Peirce called the category of firstness. So when we're sorting our experiences, just the sheer quality of an experience, that's firstness. And of course, that's not all that experience delivers from you. No consciousness consists in just staring at this lake forever, right? That doesn't happen. And so what really happens is you have a stream of experiences. So you have an experience over here. That's a quality. It looks this way. And you also have other experiences. That's another quality. Tastes and looks and feels and smells and like all of the five senses, right? They provide you with qualitative experiences. So it looks this way, tastes this way. And of course, interestingly enough, if you go up to this, I said it's a freshwater lake. If you go up to this looking, right, here's this looking, and you start engaging with this looking in a motor fashion. That is, you start moving. You go up to it, and you use the limbs that you have, and you pick up a cup and you grab a glass full of it. It tastes this way, and looks and tastes. These are all qualities. Right? And now what we have is a contrast of quality. So not only do we have a quality, so let's go back to what I was typing earlier. It's kind of a quick recap of what we did last time when we were doing phaneroscopy. You have a quality over here, which is that it looks this way. You don't have to put a word to that quality. It's just there, irrespective of the word that you might want to give it. It's that look is a distinctive look. That's what it is. And that quality is the distinctive taste, right? Whatever the taste is. So what you have here is firstness. Let me just put a 1 over here, right? The firstness of the looking, right? The firstness of the tasting. These are the qualitative features inherent to this particular experience. The qualitative features inherent to this particular experience. And of course, a looking and a tasting, we agree, they're different, right? And that's going to mean that there's secondness. There's a clash there. There's a difference, right, between. Actually, I like the way my number 2 ties into this line. There's a clash here. There's a confrontation between the qualities that we experience, right? And what have to be the characters of all signs used by an intelligence capable of learning by experience are that you have to have experiences. You have to have more than one experience. There's going to be a difference between the experiences. And moreover, the difference has to be recognized as such, right? There needs to be some third thing That's not, because otherwise we'd be right back to square one. Quite literally, we'd be right back to square one. If you couldn't do 2, secondness, right? And if you couldn't do 3, somehow grasping that, you know, there's a difference between these two qualities, you'd be back to square one. All you would have is a taste and nothing else. Just as if you only had firstness, right? All you would have is a looking, a visual appearance, if you will, a visual quality, and nothing else. So in this case, you need a visual quality, you need a gustatory quality, right? The difference between the two, and the recognition of the difference between the two. And what that gives you is firstness, secondness, and thirdness. Now notice, I'm not saying firstness, secondness, and thirdness. That is not what I'm saying, because that's a quality itself, right? What I'm saying is firstness, secondness, over here the clash, and then thirdness as this kind of realization or something above and beyond both the quality and its difference to another quality. And clearly this analysis is perfectly symmetrical, because this is a firstness and then this is a secondness, and it itself has to be grasped by a thirdness. And of course, then we can go back and forth, but that's the firstness over here. Let me just pause. That's a kind of a summary of the 3 categories that we studied last week. Is that clear, everyone, or do you have a question? Let's just pause. If it's clear, you tell me it's clear. And if you got a question, you ask your question. And hopefully the readings and a week of meditating on all this stuff makes it clearer, right? Good. All right. So those are the necessary conditions to learn from experience. We're not there yet. Super quickly, Andrew. I can only say so super quickly. Firstness is a quality considered in itself. Secondness is the confrontation between two qualities, just the confrontation. And you have to bite down on the just here, just the quality. So firstness is just the quality, bite down on the just and take it as seriously as if you've ever taken anything. Secondness is the contrast or difference between two qualities, but just the contrast, and bite down on the just here more seriously than you've ever had. And then thirdness is the realization that if you just have a contrast between qualities, it's not sufficient to be anything more than a brute event. And thirdness is whatever is the third thing that's not those two qualities that allows you to grasp the difference as a difference. That was so deep, but still. So I hope. Yeah. Because you notice, if this is a looking and this is a tasting, whatever thirdness is, this can be just a looking, right? And it can be just a tasting. It's going to be this third thing, whatever it is, right? That's going to be able to go above and beyond these things. And now you can rinse and repeat, right? The experience of this quality here, this, you know, this looking can occur again. And guess what? It can jointly occur with this experience of this taste. So this visual quality can reoccur alongside with this taste. And if you have a certain sequence of these matching, so it's like, all right, it happened, then this happened, look this way, taste this way, looks this way, tastes this way. Well, guess what? What emerges then is a habit of precisely now understanding that if it looks this way, it tastes this way. And that's the thirdness now starts to grow into, if you will. And the analogy with growth here is not even an analogy. It's literally growth. It's some sort of development. Peirce will often say that signs grow, kind of like, if you will, like a plant, right? You have you have a seed, right, over here, which is an experience, and it kind of flourishes into something more developed, which is a contrast with another quality. And this happens repeatedly. And then eventually you have a habit. And to have a habit, because this could just look mysterious and make sense on its own now if we say this because we've seen these other things, but to have a habit just is, right, is nothing more to it than to have ways in which you're prepared to act. So what we mean by habit, now go back to pragmatism, right? Go back to the epistemology stuff that we were doing a few weeks ago. To have a habit just is to now have ways in which you're prepared to act. And now, prepared to act is important. It's not necessarily the way you're currently acting, but you stand ready to act in that manner. What that means is, if you see this lake, you're prepared to act in a way such that you would drink it, for instance. And you can imagine we could list the ways in which you're prepared to act. If you have a habit that ties this appearance of fresh water with being you know, with this taste of clear water, one of the ways in which you're prepared to act is you would drink it. So you say, let me just type this in, right? Would drink it without hesitation, right? This is one of the ways in which, once you've understood, right, you wouldn't hesitate to dump it. If you were like thirsty, you would dump in some sort of receptacle, or dump your head in there, and you would drink the water because you expect that if it looks this way, then it tastes this way. Suggest to me other ways in which you would be prepared to act if you had acquired this habit. What would be some other ways in which you would be prepared to act? Let's type in a few more things. So you would drink it without hesitation. What else would you do? Offer it to others. That's right. Right. That's one of the ways in which, right, offer it to others. That's cool. What else? Looks this way, tastes this way. There's a bunch of things you would do. Water your plants with it. Yeah, offer it to your plants as well. Yeah, water. Thank you. That's a great. Water your plants with it because you know it's fresh water. Swim in it. Cool. Swim, and if you swam in it, you know, you wouldn't worry about too much about, let's say, your eyes burning. So maybe you wouldn't have to put goggles on or something like that, right? Because you know it's fresh water. You could swim in it. There's all these things you could do in it because now you know it's just water. Because what the hell do you know? Like, yeah, let's go back for a moment. If this is the first time you see a lake, what the hell do you know is in there, right? You don't know what this tastes like by looking. Like, look harder. What does it taste like? Man, if I could, by looking harder, know what stuff tastes like, when I go to the Asian grocery, things would be much easier. I'm looking at the produce section, and just by looking, I could tell what it tastes like. It doesn't work that way. We all know that, right? It's like when you go to the produce section of some ethnic grocery that you've never been to before, and you see some produce that you've never eaten, you know it looks this way. It's there. It's staring at you in the face, but you don't know what it tastes like. And then you crack it open, you're like, it tastes this way. Right? And then you know after that if it looks this way, then it tastes this way. But you can't just figure it out just by looking. And then you acquire habit, and the habit is precisely these nice lists that we're building here, right? And all of these are ways in which you would be prepared to act. This is what binds your experience together, is action. And not just punctual action, but habitual action. Not just action in one instance, but action as a disposition to act, action in the long run. Right, and of course, all of this, as you can expect, is all permeated with fallibility, right? But the payoff is the following: the payoff is that once you've acquired a habit, that is, ways in which you're prepared to act, the thing that's over here can be absent. So, for instance, if you just look at this now, right, and I ask you, and you've acquired the habit, so now you've got this thirdness here, you've acquired the habit. I ask you, is this drinkable? And let's say you really do have the habit. So everything we said earlier, you've acquired it. You've tasted it on several occasions, you've acquired the habit, and you've done all of those things, and you've got no reason to doubt that these work out well. These actions have always been fruitful. When you try to drink it, it works out well. When you offer it to others, they drink it too, and they're happy. When you water your plants with it, your plants don't die, and when you swim in it, you have a good time. And if I say, for instance, I ask you, and we're not going to taste it, we're just looking, we're going to use our eyeballs, and now I ask you, just using our eyeballs, does this taste good? What's your answer, yes or no? Like if I said this water, is it drinkable water? Let me rephrase that question. Is this drinkable water? And we're just looking, and you've got all the materials I've got on the screen right now. You've acquired your habit. And I say, is this drinkable water? Yeah, you can say yes. Of course you know, Nav. Why would you say we don't know? You don't know just by the looking, but notice what I've just said here. It's not just the looking. Just by looking, it's true that you can't tell the taste. That was true, but that's not all we have on the screen right now. What we have now is the habit, right, that ties together this habituation. Yeah, the habit, that's right, with the habit. So that's the nuanced picture. If I ask the same question over here, before we've learned from experience. This is an intelligence capable of learning from experience. Before we learn from experience, I look at this and I ask you, is this drinkable? What's the answer? before we've learned from experience. I have a visual quality and I say, is this drinkable? What's the correct answer? Yeah, no would be too strong. I can't tell, right? And an even cooler answer, let me just type it in, right? Would be this. Let's find out. Look what I typed in the chat bar. That's like, it's true I can't tell, it's true I don't know, but I can't, let's find out, right? And how would you find out? Well, go engage with it some more. Explore, inquire, move up to it, interact with this thing that you experience. Let the experience develop, right? Let's find out. It's like, all right, so cool. And then what do? You bloody taste it, right? There you go. And then it turns out, well, I mean, it's a risky thing to do. Maybe it's acid or something, right? But turns out you're good. And let's find out. And it turns out it's delicious, right? And then you're good to go. And then what you do is you say, oh, wow, it looks this way. It tastes this way. And you've learned something. You've learned something from experience, right? This is learning. Learning precisely is the development from just this, right, to this. Yeah. And say, doesn't this include past experience? Of course it does. That's why we did this on multiple occasions, right? That's why before we acquired the habit, I was going back and forth, Ariana. Do you remember I did this and this and this and this? Before we ended up having our habit, we had to do this a few times and we had to remember those past instances. So yeah, totally, yeah. To learn from experience, you got to have, if I wipe your memory, you can't learn from experience. If you don't have anything in the equivalence, like in your body, you have nothing analogous for memory storage. In any way, you can't learn from experience. To learn from experience is to carry over whatever mistakes and successes from past experiences you've had in the past over to the new ones, right? In an anticipation of the next ones. That's what we were doing last week when we were having all those colors, all those qualities. And this is nothing but the same thing with more intuitive qualities, right? Because we had very bare qualities. We had these colors, but now it's like, look, taste, you acquire the habit. And now you've explored this. You've tasted it, you stand ready to act in a certain way, right? All of these different ways in which you stand to act. And now I don't really need, right, to have to taste it. I can know just by looking. Now I can know just by looking. It needing to be present. I can say, this tastes good. This is fresh water. And we'll do that without hesitation, right? Just by looking. In fact, we do that so well that if you're an educated adult, you wouldn't even notice it's happening. Just by looking, you're like, this is going to taste great. This is going to be water. It's going to be fresh water. It's going to taste great. And what you have here, in a moment, we'll unpack all of this in a much more rigorous way, is a sign. The water now stands for its taste. The water stands for the taste over here. And the standing for relation is precisely the ways in which we're habitually prepared to act. That's what is linking this to that. And the cash value is that you don't need to reperform the experiment again. You don't have to have the taste all the time. Is this like imagine every summer vacation you have to go back and you have to check whether the water is still drinkable, or even every cup. It's like, well, it was drinkable a moment ago. I don't know. Is it still drinkable now? It's like, no, you don't need to do that. At that point, you can just coast. And you coast on what? You coast on the habit. And unless you have reason to think that you were wrong with that habit, unless you're surprised by the fact that that habit breaks down, you got no reason to change it. So what you can do now is you can take this step, which is a cognitively hugely important step, where you can just have the thing stand for something else. It now acts as a sign of something else. And then you can skip the actual object that the sign stands for. And that spares you so much. And that's what it means to learn from experience. Let's just pause now. Is that clear, everyone, or do you have a question? If it's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. This is not yet the definition of a sign. You're looking at a sign right now, but roughly speaking, a quality that stands for something else in virtue of, let's say, roughly a habit, yeah, but we're going to fine-tune that. We're going to do it in multiple washes. So that's like a first wash, Andrew. Not a definition. We'll spell one out in insanely high level of detail. Yeah. Yeah. So let's get started with that, right? Last week, this is the Peirce packet 5, right? This is this week's reading. Last week we did phaneroscopy, so I start off with just actually I'm gonna read this one because Andrew said, can you tell me the categories again? This is super crucially important because it's at the base of his system, if you will. Phaneroscopy reveals 3 categories of experience. Firstly come firstnesses, or positive internal characteristics of the subject in itself. And by subject here, he means grammatical subject. He means the thing, not the I. He means the it. Secondly comes secondnesses, or brute actions of one subject or substance on another, regardless of law or of any third subject. Thirdly comes thirdnesses, or the mental or quasi-mental influence of one subject on another relative to a third. Since the demonstration of this proposition is too stiff for the infantile logic of our time, I've preferred it to state it as a surmise to be verified by observation. That's what we did last week. We verified that surmise, that hypothesis, by means of verification, by means of observation, precisely because he feels like the logic's not up to snuff. And that's why he had to devise his own logic, because he thought the logic that was available wasn't sufficient. And that's why he's coming up with these terms too, because he doesn't find any terms that will do the work that he wants to do. Now, signs involve thirdness. In fact, the very word means signifies something which is in the middle of between two others. To stand for, that is, to be in such a relation to another that for certain purposes it is treated as if it were that other. Thus, a spokesman, deputy, attorney, agent, vicar, diagram, symptom, counter, description, concept, premise, testimony, all represent something else in their several ways to minds who consider them that way. So let's go back here, right? Let's go back to this. This represents something else. It stands for, right, something else. And Peirce said here, such a mediating representation may be termed an interpretant because it fulfills the office of an interpreter who says that a foreigner says the same thing which he himself says. This is really worth reading again, over and over again, over the course of the week, right? Such a mediating representation may be termed an interpretant. This is a word that he's coining, not interpreter, but interpretant. So the thing that it does the interpreting, because it fulfills the office of an interpreter. The office means the function. It does the same thing as an interpreter. And think of what an interpreter does. An interpreter says that a foreigner says the same thing which he himself says. So if you hire an interpreter, the interpreter has, let's say, a person speaking Japanese. Let's assume you don't know Japanese. The Japanese person says something, and then I'll say it, I'll interpret in English, and I'll tell you. I say the Japanese person says, wakataka, something like that, and then the person is saying, where's the nearest hotel? And then I'll tell you in English, where is the nearest hotel? And to be an interpreter just is to take me as standing for whatever that person was saying, that what I'm saying is the same thing as what he himself said. So let me repeat that again. Such a mediating representation may be termed an interpretant because it fulfills the office or role of an interpreter who says that a foreigner says the same thing which he himself says, right? So to take this as a sign of a taste just is to understand that this appearance does the same work that the taste will do, right? So it's now standing for the taste. It puts you in the same sort of position with respect to the taste as the taste itself would, because you could go back and you could have the taste itself, right? You could have the taste itself, but you can skip that and you can say, now I trust that this thing is now putting me in the same position as the taste, right? And that's a habitual thing. And interpreters can lie, we agree. And signs are distinguished precisely by their ability to deceive and ability to err, right? And that's where the fallibility comes in. Everything in Peirce's system is going to be permeated by the possibility of error, and he's going to live with that. There's never going to be something that's going to be like, you know, a kind of a base that you can sort of anchor yourself on in the way that Descartes hoped. So you're always going to have to contend with the possibility of mistakes. But at the end of the day, what you can do is you can use your habits to structure your experience and anticipate what's going to come next. And by the time you can do that, then things can stand for other things. So let me reread all of this, because these definitions of the sign, and this is the beginning, it's not the formal definition, right, are worth rereading. To stand for, that is, to be in such a relation to another that for certain purposes it is treated as if it were that other, right? So this is important. You reread that. And that's the beginning of this idea of a sign. And I'm motivating it here. I could have just given you the reading, but I'm motivating it here with some examples so that you can see from ordinary life how you get to that stage, right? How is this a sign of the taste, right? Through a process of habituation, you can take the looking to stand for a tasting. And to take the looking to stand for a tasting means that the looking can stand in for the tasting. Right? You needn't have the tasting anymore. This stands in for it, and that gives you the ability to detach yourself a little bit from the world and to roam around. There's a lot of flexibility, cognitively speaking, that having signs in the mix starts to afford for a creature that is capable of learning by experience, right? And now, remember, we have the categories to help us out. So this now is going to be the strict definition of the sign, all right? So I want to tell you right away, this is going to be tough. We can thus formulate the structure of the sign as follows. So using these three categories, remember we have the categories of firstness, secondness, and thirdness that we took pains to clarify last week. Using these three categories, we may say that a sign or representamen, that's how he calls the thing that does the standing for relation, so this is a Latin word, representamen, is a first which stands in such a genuine triadic relation to a second, and hopefully these terms now mean something to you, called its object, as to be capable of determining a third, called its interpretant, to assume the same triadic relation to its object, in which it stands itself to the same object. The triadic relation is genuine, that is, its three members are bound together by it in a way that does not consist in any complexus of dyadic relations. My friends, of everything we're going to learn in this class, I would argue that this is one of the toughest passages you're probably going to read in this class. You can meditate on this for about 10 years and it would keep yielding dividends, perhaps even longer than 10 years, right? So reread that one over and over again. Collected Papers, Volume 2, paragraph 274. Peirce tried over and over again to formulate these things, and we have multiple definitions, just like we had multiple definitions of the pragmatic maxim, but this is by consensus, if you will, of the community of people who are inquiring to this, the best definition there is, right? Let me just now pause. I want to tell you right away, if this is not 100% clear, there's nothing wrong with you, okay? It's just a lot in there. This is the strict definition. All right, let's read it one more time, and then we'll open up the floor for some questions, and then I'm going to move on to some other stuff, because we have to, there's other things I want to read in between, but beneath. But let's say it again. Using these three categories, we may say that a sign is a representamen, a sign or representamen is a first. Let me just pause here. A first. Do we understand what that means? Something is a first. I mean, it just presents itself. It's just there. There's going to be a quality. A sign is at least something. The quality. Remember the quality? We have to have experiences. The sign is going to be an experience. Is that clear? Let's just pause there. We're going to take it in super close steps. We're going to parse this into parts, like really slowly. A sign is a first. We stop there. It's at least an experience. You got to have an experience. Tell me if that's clear. To have a sign, right? So a sign is an experience. Pause. Tell me if that's clear, because then we'll take it step by step. A sign is an experience. A sign is a first. A sign is a quality. Just in itself, there's something has to be there. Remember? You're not going to have a sign if you don't got nothing there. It's like there's nothing. Well, good luck. There's got to be something. That's where all the work of last week helps, right? So firstness. A sign is a first. And notice the capital letter here. When we say first, we mean this in the sense of Peircean firstness, right? If you have a question, pause. No, not exclusively, because we're not done with the definition, Reese. We just stopped there. It's not a sign yet. Can't be a sign of anything unless it's a sign of something else. Yeah, Reese. So if we stop there, this would make no sense, because it wouldn't be a sign of anything. There's no such thing as a sign that's not a sign of or about or directed towards or standing for something else. So if we stop there, we wouldn't have a sign. So that's a necessary but not sufficient condition of a sign. So we can go on. Reese, that was good. So I'm hoping everyone, is that clear? We're not done. That's just like I'm pausing where my little red line is. I'm just pausing in the definition so we're clear on what it is, right? So we have an experience which stands in such a genuine triadic relation. We'll unpack what we mean by genuine triadic relation, but triadic means three-termed relation. We'll diagrammatically represent that in a second, right? So which stands in such a genuine triadic relation to a second. What's the second? So if this was a first, if the sign was a quality, and then it stands in relation to a second, what do we mean by second? With a capital S. No, not the habit. A contrast, exactly. A contrast with something that's, Ariana, you got it. The second is a contrast with something that's not the first. Whatever was the first, in order to stand for something else, and I'm going to emphasize the else, it has to be something else. Do we agree? It can't be that quality. Does everyone see that? If you're going to have a relation with anything, it has to be a relationship with something else, right? So if you're going to stand in some sort of relation, let alone a genuine triadic relation, but in a relation to, it's like, got to stand with respect to something else. Like if I imagine, for instance, let me just make a drawing here for a second. All right, that's not the drawing I wanted to make. Let me make a drawing here, right? If I stand in a relation to something else, there's something between these two dots. There's a relation, right? And the arrow here is my relation. The dots have to be separate. I have to make two dots. And in fact, even if I try to do what we call in logic a reflective relation, even if I try to do this, to the extent that there is, and I don't know, can everyone see my little red dot here? My little red cursor? Can everyone see my little red cursor moving? Cool. All right. To the extent that this is what's called a reflexive relation, a relation of something with itself. To the extent that there is, you have to make the dot once. I'm going to press my purple dot. There's a relation, and then I'm going to overlap the dot. You can't see it, but I'm going to press on my marker again. Do you see that? Like if I have a relationship with myself, if I relate to myself, I have to at least count myself numerically different, right? And Peirce is going to say here that you need at least two different things, right, in order to have a relation at minimum, right? Even if the limit case would be a reflexive relation, but it has to be understood as being something else, and that means there has to be kind of a space in between, right? So let's go. There has to be an experience, and the experience has to be in a relation with another experience. Let's go back to what we've done earlier as an illustration. Let's do the other one. Let's clear this. Experience, other experience, looking, tasting, first, second, or actually the contrast with is over here, right? Because of course that would be a first as well, and the contrast is here. So stands against, it borders up against, it goes right up against something else. Like close your eyes and go push against the wall, right? Close your eyes and go push against the wall. The wall is where you end and something else begins, even if you don't know what you're pushing against. Do you understand? Like there's that, you're pushing against, you close your eyes. Like imagine you go to some horror Halloween, like, you know, those things where they close the lights and they try to spook you, and you come up against something with your hands and you push against it. You have no clue what you're touching because you're in the pitch black. It's in the dark. But there's something else that begins there. Something else begins there. So like something else begins there. There is a contrast. Does that make sense to people? That's the secondness. There's a contrast. So something has to be there. You have to have an experience. The experience has to have a contrast. So first little purple thing, you have to have an experience. The experience has to contrast with something else called its object. Let's pause here. So far, so good? I'm dissecting this one paragraph because it's arguably one of the most crucial ones. I don't want to lose anyone because if I can't infer anything from silence. Owen is good. If you're good or good enough so far, because remember, part of homework is to think through these things, but good enough, you need to let me know. Cool. All right, because I don't want you to just kind of read through this thing and be, yeah. Is the second referring to a second first? Right now, it would be a symmetrical relationship. Right? So Andrew, you'd have a first standing to an else in virtue of secondness, but you understand that that relation is completely symmetrical. As far as that quality is concerned, that other quality, that's not this one. So whatever one is, whatever quality it is, right? If it's something else, actually, just to make the else clearer, I'm actually going to use a different quality. So let me just use a different color, right? Different color. And of course, the confrontation of the colors is going to look like this. right? And then what you have as is the confrontation though between the purple and the pink. Do we agree, Andrew, that from the pink's perspective, it's the complete reverse, right? It's completely symmetrical. That this is right now has no order. There's no order. Cool. Yeah. So far it's there, right? We just have a difference. So let's just reread this again. Using the three phaneroscopic categories, we may say that a sign is a first, that is a qualitative experience, which stands in such a genuine triadic relation to a second, called its object, that will be the other thing, as to be capable of determining a third. So now there's gonna be some third thing. So it's not just gonna be one contrast with something else, something that's not one. Actually, let me just put tilde one. So let's go one, a contrast with not one. The contrast is over here. That's the second. So as to be capable of determining a third. So that is going to be a third thing, right? That thing's going to be called its interpretant. And not only is it going to give rise to a third, it's going to allow the interpretant, the third thing, to assume the same triadic relation to its object in which it stands itself to the same object. So imagine, for instance, one is me. I'm speaking in English. Two, right, is the contrast with the thing I'm standing for. What am I standing for? I'm standing for the Japanese person. Japanese is not English. Do we agree? Like I'm speaking in Japanese and in English, and I'm the interpreter, and the English is different from, I'm not just repeating English, I'm translating. I'm not repeating Japanese, I'm translating Japanese, right? So imagine, let me just do a diagram here. Imagine you have E. E stands for English. I don't want you to think I'm crazy, and I'm hoping this is helpful. So pause. So far, so good. Tell me if you got to follow me step by step. E is English. Someone starts saying something in English. All right, E is in English. Imagine I speak in English and I just repeat what you say. So you say blah 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 blah. You say something like the sandwich is ready. I just repeat the sandwich is ready. And then you say, it's nice outside. And I say, it's nice outside. I'm not doing the same kind of work here, right? Because what you need is not English. Now, what's not English? Well, in this case, let's say it's Japanese, but another language. So not English. Let's say Japanese, right? So not English. Let's put brackets, Japanese. If someone says, Atuka sun takamaka, whatever, I don't speak Japanese, so forgive my phonetics here. And then someone says, he would like to see a hotel, please. We agree that that's different. The sounds I produce, the quality, right, that was heard here and the quality that was heard here, they're different. And hence this division line here. So far, so good, everyone. Yeah, they're different qualities, right? Like the sound's not the same. So like, let's say, for instance, let's use two languages I know, actually. Let's actually, just occurred to me, holy crap, why am I doing this? I'm like bilingual. Let's do French. I'm so slow. Yeah, what's wrong with me? All right, so let's just do this instead of just making up phonetics I don't know, right? So English, right? So someone says, I don't know, what's a word that sounds really different. I don't even want you to get the sense that aujourd'hui, je crois qu'il va faire très beau. Right? You don't know what that means. So I'm going to translate to you. I'm going to say, today I think it'll be a really beautiful day. That's in English. Now, pay attention to the quality. Aujourd'hui, je crois qu'il va faire très beau. That's the first, that's the quality over here, right, in French. It's not English. In English, the quality is, today, I think today is going to be a nice day. Locally, that would be the best translation. Today, I think it's going to be a nice day. Do we agree those are not the same qualities? I didn't just repeat them. They're different. We all grasp that difference? Yeah. And they're not just different, but they're grasped as different. So to be different just is to have this two right at the border. But now they're grasped as different. And the sign is to say that what I said is a sign of, in English is a sign of what I said in French, just is to say that what I said, right, puts this third thing, the interpretant, in a relation with this. You can go through, right? It puts you through this. The interpretant puts you in a relationship with my French, right? So by translating it, essentially what I'm doing is I'm putting you in contact with some other quality, right? And so it determines a third called its interpretant to assume the same triadic relation to its object in which it stands to itself to the same object. So what you can do henceforth, because now you've been connected to my original utterance in French, je crois qu'aujourd'hui ça va être une très belle journée. If you know another language, if you understood what I said in English when I said, I think today is going to be a nice day, it's getting a little cluttered. Let me try to make this as clear as possible. If you understood what I said today, I think it's going to be a nice day, and you take that to stand for aujourd'hui, je crois que ça va être une très belle journée, then you can now stand in the same relation with respect to that. Does anyone know another language that's not English or French? I'm sure there is. So volunteer, tell me another language. Just say, okay, Hore, perfect. All right, so Farsi. And so you could now say, let's say to your parents, right? Mark said, and then you say in Farsi, right? You could say whatever it is that you would have to say, that other quality, which will be different from, and then it would put your parents in the same relation to my original French utterance, right? You would now, to understand the relation between those two, just is to now stand ready to do the same thing that I did, which is to put you back in contact with that object, right? And the triadic relation is genuine. That is, its three members are not bound together in any way that in a way that does not consist in any complexes of dyadic relations. You can put that on the shelf. We'll see that in a few moments, right? There's a lot to take in, but as a first approximation, is can you begin to discern that there's something there? Can you begin to grasp? How's your level of understanding? Just I want a beginning, not the end. Doesn't have to be perfect. Was that helpful? Are you beginning to understand what he means by a sign? I'm only hearing from Curtis, Owen, hopefully everybody else. Remember, if I can't hear you, I'm wondering what's going on, right? So I can't tell. And notice here he says, this definition does not require an interpretant to be a modification of consciousness. We'll go back here when we talk about the different nuances, right? Great question, Andrew. Is the sign the thirdness or that entire thing? The sign's the entire triad. But Peirce sometimes use the word sign, unfortunately, as you can see here, right, to stand just for what we call the sign vehicle or representamen. So the sign is the whole shabab, the whole kebab, the whole thing. That's the sign, right? There's no sign that's, if you had, let's say, let's take a familiar sign, right? There's no such thing as a sign that doesn't stand for something else to something else, right? If there's no standing for relation to the object for an interpretant, it's not a sign, right? You have to have the whole thing. So technically S here, that's the colloquial way of understanding the word sign. That's not accurate. We'll see this when we look at the model. All right, so let's go back to this. This stands for another something, something else. This is a quality first that stands for something else to a third, such that the ways in which you're prepared to act, this third here, right, is ready to, on just the basis of the sight alone, prepare to act for the taste. Let me say that again. If you have this as a sign of that, if you have the appearance of the visual appearance as a sign of the drinkability or the taste, right? The thirdness, the interpretant, just is to say that it suffices to look in order to know you can drink. It suffices to look in order to know you can drink. Does that make sense? It's a sign of this because it suffices to look in order to know you can drink. Like I'm trying to tie it all up together, right? It's the drink, the taste, right? This is its representative. That's my attorney. It's like the taste is saying, remember all the what we were reading a moment ago on the way to this definition, right? Let me just go back to that quote. What am I doing? What is this? All right. To stand for, that is to be in such a relation to another that for certain purposes, it is treated as if it were that other. A spokesman, deputy, attorney, let's go back, spokesman. I like spokesman, right? Well, you know what? I don't like to deal with my clients, right? This is the taste. I don't like to deal with my clients directly, I don't know why it's doing this with my pencil. The taste doesn't like to deal with its clients directly, so it uses an attorney. My vision, the visual aspect represents me. Think of an attorney or a spokesperson, right? My people will get in touch with your people. It's like the taste will get in touch with you via the appearance. You don't need to be like, you never know who the client is. They're represented by an attorney. So this is the attorney, right? This is the client, and this is you having dealings with the attorney. And having dealings with the attorney is a sign of the client insofar as you think that all of your dealings with the attorney consist in, by proxy, dealings with the client. Does that help? Dealings with an attorney that represent the client. Hopefully that helps. I thought that was cool. I thought that was pretty cool. All right, so we have the beginning of understanding what a sign is. And we have a beginning of understanding of how we can learn from experience, because signs can precisely then skip. The object needn't be present anymore. It can be absent, right? So now let's look at learning as distinguishing between illusion and reality. All right. And the reason I'm saying this is because Thomas Sibiok, who's one of the important semioticians working in the Peircean tradition, once said that the main mission of semiotics is to mediate between reality and illusion. But notice here, when he's saying this, he's not saying this in a skeptical way. So this entire mission that semiotics has to mediate between reality and illusion, that's not done in a skeptical way. So one of the things I'm hoping you've been exposed to in this class so far is that there are other things to do in epistemology, namely in philosophy of knowledge and metaphysics and philosophy of reality, besides worrying about made up skeptical concerns, right? There's other things that we can be doing. And notably, the standard skeptical concerns are completely suspended in phaneroscopy. So what we did last week showed that skeptical concerns really don't apply in many ways, because indeed the claim that X is illusory, suppose you say X is illusory, makes no sense unless whatever X is shows up in some way. So if you're going to say X is illusory, certainly X isn't. X itself isn't. And likewise, to worry that the purple expanse hides something is to acknowledge that the purple expanse is itself not hidden. So when we're going to talk about what it means to be an illusion, right, we can't, in the analysis of an illusion, we can't make do without this not being an illusion, and we can't make do without this not being an illusion. An illusion is going to be something else on our semiotic analysis, right? So this is a sheet that you might want to press pause on and really meditate it on, because it's nice to know that there's other things that we can do in philosophy other than just worry about the skeptic, right? If last week you were worrying whether this was hiding something, well, to worry that it hides something is to acknowledge that this is not hidden, that this thing here, that whatever was present before you, this experience, right? Yeah, and made up concerns, we know that that's paper doubt, right? It's not genuine doubt. So taking that and reapplying it to what we have, one of the prices we pay for having habits and not needing to have the object of the sign present, right, is that we can make mistakes. And I told you that part of the reason why we need signs in the mix in order to understand learning by experience is because learning by experience, as you know, involves effing up. And I told you, Peirce's entire philosophy is a philosophy of how to figure out how to pick yourself back up after effing up, because you can always screw up, you can always make mistakes. So if you take this looking as an attorney to stand for this client, this tasting, and in all of your dealings as an interpretant, you take this representamen to stand for this object, and the taking for just consists in you dealing with the attorney as if it was the client. If you do that, and the attorney here, right, is a first, which means it's a quality, and so you know which habits to take depending on which qualities present themselves in your experience, then you might confront a situation like this. Here's a nice body of water, and here's another body of water. At any rate, it looks this way and it looks this way, right? But there's a bit of a problem. Let me just zoom in just to make sure that we can see this image really well. This is Lake something in Winnipeg or something like that. What do we have in the lower right corner? Those of you who know better, what do you think we're looking at in the lower right corner? Which lake is this? Andrew says illusion. Yeah, it's a technical word. It's a mirage. It's a heat mirage. That's right. And that's illusory, right? So what do we mean exactly when we're talking about an illusory experience? Because remember what I said a moment ago. To say that X is illusory, that makes no sense unless whatever the X is, it shows up in some way, right? Well, this shows up in some way, right? This experience here, this is a visual experience. Let me just pause. You can see this, what I've just underlined and put an arrow to. Do we agree? You can see this. You can experience this. Do we agree? So how is this? Remember, in and of itself, if you're grabbing it like a phaneroscopist, you're just grabbing it in and of itself, right? It's not illusory. The illusion comes from the fact that you bring to that experience habitual ways of acting. So what happens when you bring habitual ways of acting to this quality, right? Well, you think it stands for something else. What do you think it stands for if you haven't learned from experience that this is going to be a mirage? What do you think it stands for? So this was, it looked like clear water and it was tasty. It was drinkable. You look at this. What do you expect this to be? What's this question mark here? What do you expect this to be? If you carry over the same habits, these are the same habits. You carry over the same habits. It'll taste good, right? And all of the list that we did earlier, remember that list? We listed a bunch of stuff. All of that would still apply. So you would stand ready, ways in which you are prepared to act. You would stand ready to what? You would stand ready, what did we say? To drink it without hesitation, to bring your friends, to water your plants, and all of those habits, right? Those are the ways in which you're prepared to act. You would apply them in this case. Let me pause so far. So far, so good? Is that clear? You're carrying over the same habitual expectations because it looks this way. It's the same trigger. It's like, this was drinkable, and this looks this way, and it's darn close, right? Now, what happens though when you confront the real secondness of doing it? Sand does not taste good. Sand is not good. Looks this way, tastes this way, right? And as kids, look, man, we've all had to do this, right? Sand is such a curious thing. Kids have to put it in their mouth. Do we agree this is a firstness? And this is also a firstness. Do we agree? Eating sand, there's something it is like to be a bat. There's something it is like to eat sand. There's a quality to eating sand, right? And it's not the same as this. There's a thickness here. It's not the same. It's not what you expected. Let me say that again slowly and hopefully with a lot of weight, right? This is not what you expected. So you were hoping for water, right? And it ain't water. I'm sorry, it's sand. Your expectations have been frustrated. Your habits have broken down, right? There's an abrupt change in the sand, and that's the secondness. That's right. The sand itself is just a taste. That's right, Owen. The contrast between your expectations that were carrying over on cruise control, because you were on cruise control, looks this way, oh, crap, dump my mug in, give myself a nice refreshing cup of it, right? That's the secondness. Yeah, that's beautifully put, Owen. Well done. All right. And that's what an illusion is, right? This is what we mean by real and unreal, right? A real experience just is one that we have a hold on, right? One that we know what will come next. We stand ready in ways that we're prepared to act, and those ways of being prepared to act are habitually confirmed. And so we got a firm handle on this relation. We can take this as a sign of this. So this is a representament that stands for an object to an interpretant. And this is a representament that stands for an object for an interpretant. But in this case now it errs because signs can deceive, right? But they don't deceive in the sense that this can't possibly deceive. It is what it is. And this can't possibly deceive. It is what it is. And also this can't possibly deceive. It is what it is. The deception lies at the level of the relation between those three things. That's where the deception is. The deception just consists in the following, right? Let me just now scroll down and look at Peirce packet 2. Reality is a conception which we must first have had when we discovered that there was an unreal, an illusion. That is, when we first corrected ourselves. Guess what's happening to this kid? He's discovering reality, right? He's discovering that not everything is the way you expect it to be. And that forms the conception of reality, that he may be wrong in the way he anticipates the world to be. So reality is a conception which we must first have had when we discovered that there was an unreal, an illusion. That is, when we first corrected ourselves. And so those two series of cognition, the real and the unreal, consists of those which, at a time sufficiently future, the community will always continue to reaffirm, and those which, under the same conditions, will ever after be denied. You're not going to maintain that this is water for very long. You could be wrong on the first go. So let me just put, right, you say, oh, this is water. I got this figured out. But how long would you maintain that this is water? I mean, first, it's an honest mistake, but you would correct yourself because it ain't water. This is not water. And you would correct yourself. And that's what it means to learn. That's what it means to be an intelligence capable of learning by experience. It's to form habits and to correct your habits. This is super important, right? Owen writes, in the context of science, this is a fundamental pattern to breakthroughs in the space. Of course, this generalizes from kids all the way up to scientists. An intelligence capable of learning from experience, let's do a catalog of everything we have on the sheet, is an experience that has qualities, qualitative experiences, contrasts with other qualitative experiences, an ability to relate those qualitative experiences, often in a way that lets one stand for the other, thereby generating habits of action, those habits of action then being able to be corrected in light of further experiences. Yeah, magicians take advantage of this, don't they? Totally, because we come in with all our habituations, right? And they know which ones they are, and they hide everything in the blind spots of our habits. Exactly, because they know where our eyes are going to scan and what they're going to do. Let me say everything I just said, because I think it's super philosophically important. It jokes as well, because they break our expectations, right? What must be the characters of all science used by intelligence capable of learning experience? I need the minimum ingredients. 1, 2, 3. Once 3 is capable of taking 1 to stand for 2, then I don't actually need to have 2 to be present. I can just take the 1 to stand for the 2. Once I do that in a way that becomes habitual, that habituation lets me form expectations, but those expectations can be shown wrong. I can be unhappy, and I can always then correct them in the light of further experience. That's, if you will, looking at what's happening under the hood when we talk about what it means to learn. Let me pause. Is this starting to coalesce into a picture that starts to make some sense? Andrew says, do you write 3 over habit on purpose, or are they the same? A habit is a more developed third. There's different kinds of third. There's the bare minimum of a third, and a habit would be a more developed one, Andrew. Yeah, there's different grades of thirdness. Like there's more developed thirds. There's thirds of thirds that have happened several times. That would be a habit. Yeah, because the first time you realize a contrast, it's still a third. Yeah. I want to hear from everyone. Is this starting to coalesce into a picture of the human condition that starts to make sense? And I mean starting to coalesce, right? Because it doesn't have to be super crystal clear, but good enough, you know? Because teaching you a thinker like Peirce is like, it's such a difficult task. I mean, it's a story of what it means to be in the world, right? Yeah. And for those of you who aren't, this is high level philosophy. It's good level philosophy, right? All right. So it is not easy. That's for sure. No one says it's easy. Let me give you another example. This looks straight. This feels straight. Looking is a quality. Feeling is a quality, right? And we call this real. Why do we say this is a real experience? Because the habits, the ways in which we're prepared to act have not been shown wrong. The real and the unreal are the ones that we will continue to affirm versus the ones that we will deny. Here's one that we would deny. Here's an unreal experience. It looks bent. The pen is in the water. Descartes makes such a big deal of the stick that looks bent in water. For him, it's like you have to overhaul all of philosophy. It's like, no way. It looks bent. True. Right? And based on a habit, you'd expect it to feel bent. If it looks bent, it ought to feel bent, but it feels straight. To be unreal just is to say that the habit that we normally would have, that if it looks a certain way, it feels a certain way with our hands, right, just is not confirmed by subsequent experience. And thus, illusions are simply experiences that we would not be prepared to act upon in the long run. So, if we need water, we would not go here. And notice I say we. Maybe you might be duped, but no one in the community over the long run would be duped. Can you imagine all of humanity trying to obtain water there over and over without ever learning, right? We would correct ourselves. If we needed water, we would not head to a mirage to get the water. And if we needed a crooked thing, we would not pick this up because it's actually straight. In the long run, a group, the community, would not be duped. Right? Illusions are simply experiences that we would not be prepared to act upon. So there is no reason to doubt everything as Descartes does, simply because our habits must be acquired, you have to learn them, and adjusted. They may be wrong in light of new experience. Keep on trucking. It's not the end of the world. You had a habit, it didn't work out. You had a relationship, it didn't work out. Date again, lots of fish in the ocean, right? Habits have to be acquired and have to be adjusted, and illusions are simply experiences that we would not be prepared to act upon in the long run because they would have been shown wrong in light of new experience. Does that sheet right now make sense? Is that helping the coalescence of the picture altogether? Again, big ideas require a lot of thinking, but just to really hopefully do the best I can to sort of explain these things. That's the story that you have in Peirce, right? Very different story, very different story. Andrew writes, so depends whether the pencil is bent is not really, whether the pencil is bent or not is really not of concern. Yeah, it's not a big deal. Andrew, it's hilarious when you read the ninth set of, I think it's the ninth or the sixth set of objections and replies after the meditations. It's like the end of the bloody world for Descartes. Like that is supposed to be for him. You can't trust anything. I got to retreat to the back of my skull. You know, it's like, no, it's not a big deal. You're right. It's really not a concern. It's like, yeah, you know why you're seeing it that way? Because it's in water. And it's a poor sign of straightness because what you're actually witnessing is not just the pencil, it's the pencil warped with the, light waves and whatever. None of this is a big deal. No big deal over here. No big deal over here. Do you see that, Andrew? It's a thing. They're part of experience. Illusions are part of experience. It's just like, yeah, illusions simply are experiences that where you were wrong, but in the long run, you'd be like, I know better than to trust that. One and done. It's like, okay, that has a place in my worldview. We can put that, assign its proper place, and that's fine. There's no reason to doubt everything. It's like, yeah, sometimes we're wrong. Yeah, that's right. And we're revealed that we're wrong in virtue of what? Further experiences. It's like, yeah, deep breaths, live with it, then what? And there's more for philosophers to do. We don't go out of work just because we stop talking about skepticism. Like, believe it or not, there's more for us to do. If we philosophers stop talking about the skeptics, there's still way more for us to do. And what you see in Peirce is what it would look like to do philosophy without always worrying about skepticism. And importantly, to use some more tools that we had learned, the first grade of clearness, a mental image, cannot distinguish between this and this. If what you think about when you think of water just as a mental image, how can you tell those two apart? Like, seriously, they look the same, right? You would test it against your mental image. You'd be like, that's water up there, right? Whereas the third grade of clearness, that is the actions that could be done, can distinguish them. Because the third grade of clearness isn't just about the mental image. The third grade of clearness says we define a concept based in terms of the actions that we're prepared to undertake. Well, guess what? I'm prepared to go swim in the thing at the bottom, but I'm not prepared to go swim in the thing at the top. I'm prepared to, if I'm desperate to live and I need water, head in the direction of the thing at the bottom, but not the thing at the top. I'm prepared to bring my swimwear for the thing at the bottom, but not the thing at the top. And so would anybody else who underwent the same experiences. And does everyone remember first grade of clearness, second grade, third grade? Can you see that difference? Does that slide help to coalesce as well? I'm trying to tie in together. Remember, it's a system, so I'm trying to tie in together all the stuff that we did in the previous weeks. Tell me if that's helpful. The course that we did on the grades of clearness. Just confirm that this is Are we following along? And if you got a question, again, ask your question. All right, let me pause. I'm getting a lot of silence. I'm not sure what to interpret from the silence. People I'm not hearing from. How are you doing? Could be good, could be bad. That's a sign. What's a sign of, right? I can't tell. I want to just hear back. If you're lost, tell Papa Bear you're lost. If everything's good and it's just deep and you feel a bit intimidated, then you tell me that as well. Just be honest. Just tell me where you're at. Because I love all of y'all, not just like 2 or 3 people. That's perfectly normal. Sergeant says, I'm struggling, but need to think about it. Yeah. It's a little lofty, but manageable. What does lofty mean in that sense, John? I'm not sure what that meant. Again, I'm French, so I don't know what lofty means. I don't want to look it up. Can you unpack that word for me? Yeah. Okay, cool. Neat. Pretty big idea. No worries. And philosophy of science is, if you will, looking inside the basement of a lot of the things that we looked at in epistemology, right? What it means to know, what it means to mean, right? It's a different perspective on all of that. All right. So earlier we read the definition, the strict definition of the sign, which is very formal and which is it has a lot. Andrew says, does Peirce reject the notion of objective truth altogether? We'll go back to our very first week, right? It's what we're aiming for, right? It's the bullseye. Of course he doesn't reject it. That's what we're working towards. Yeah, Andrew, everything we said still holds. Yeah, we're still working towards that. And what does it mean to work to that? It's like, all right, well, we learn. It's like, fool me once, shame on me. Shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me, right? You know that saying, right? It's the same thing. It's like we learn to figure out, we sort out experiences, the real and the unreal. Let me just go back, Andrew, and answer your question. I had that quote. I'm going to go back to it. And so those 2 series of cognition, the real and the unreal, consists of those which, at a time sufficiently future, the community will always continue to reaffirm, and those which, under the same conditions, will ever after be denied. Andrew, does that answer that question? We sort out what's real and what's not real. There's the stuff I mean, it's super ultra clear, right? And you can think of it as like trying to figure out the wheat from the chaff and trying to figure out which habits work. Remember, this is an experience, and undeniably what they are in and of themselves. And as a phaneroscopist, you grasp them as such. But it's the habits. Not all the habits are going to work out, right? Some habits are going to be frustrated. Same thing for this, right? So if you go back to the previous example here, this is an experience, and this is an experience. This is an experience. All these are experiences. The question is, which habits are going to go through and which habits are going to be frustrated? And when you frustrate your habits, when the world doesn't cooperate, you just bloody learn. And then you share your results with other people who are bloody learning. And then as we collectively F up, we collectively F up less and less and less. And it's like, hey, we're inching towards something. What are we inching towards? A world where we don't F up. Will there ever be such a world? No. But what else are you going to do? Like inch towards a world where we F up less. It's like by pooling our results together. It's literally science. That's exactly, and that's like, think of how beautiful a definition of science that is, as opposed to just a static body of knowledge held by a bunch of priests. It's like you and I, how about this? We live our lives and we tell each other stories about what we've learned, and then we keep refining that, and we get as many people involved in that collective enterprise. We all commit ourselves to figuring stuff out. We all expose ourselves to the possibility of being wrong. And then when we're wrong, we admit that we're wrong, and then we try again, right? Owen writes, so it's ironic because that makes Peirce even more objective than others, because he recognizes that we can be wrong versus those who are so ignorant, they always believe they're objectively correct. Yeah, you could argue that's a much stronger position to take, right? It's like, it's a very nuanced stance that he takes, and he's never going to proclaim once and for all that he's got it all figured out. And if anyone did that, he'd be like, son, sit down. It's like, really? Right? You'll have it all figured out when you'll be in the position of a God. Newsflash, you'll never be in the position of a God. What you're going to go is, what's going to happen is you're going to undergo experiences over time. It's like, yeah. And then you're going to build habits on the basis of those experiences as they unfold. It's like, yeah. And then some of those expectations are going to work and some won't. And the only way to find out is to undergo further experiences. And when they don't work, you go back to the drawing board and you create other expectations and other habits. And you keep working on that. And then you have signs, because things stand for other things. You start grasping the relations. The universe is woven in a network of relations. There aren't just these discrete things. Things are related and there's a pattern. You start slowly discerning that pattern. You're like, I know what that is. That's a durian. I know what that tastes like. If I crack that open, I know what that tastes like. And all of a sudden you can buy it without cracking it open, even if it don't cost a fortune. It's like, I figured it out. How'd you learn? I just learned. What you thought inside your head? It smells like, yeah. There was no options for polling. That was a mistake. I just, I screwed up, Ariana. I mistouched the button. There's no polling. Yeah, cool. I didn't know that showed up on your end. I closed it. Yeah, that's just me making an accident. Because I F up, right? Ariana, we're talking about effing up. So let me just, okay. I'm going to, A is the correct answer. All right, let me just kind of do another gloss on this. So far, here's the picture we have. Right? Something shows up. It's like, yeah, undeniably something shows up. If you think nothing shows up, I'm sorry, but no, I don't even know what to tell you. It's like, Mark, nothing shows up. It's like, oh, son, you're confused, you know? It's like something shows up. What shows up? Well, whatever shows up, shows up. It's like, all right. And guess what? Other things show up. It's like, yeah, they do. How? Well, we'll find out. That's part of the process itself. We're going to turn that machinery onto itself to find out how things even show up. But that they show up, that's like the bare beginnings of stuff. It's like, yeah, experiences occur. You undergo experiences. And you undergo experiences that have qualitative features, and they're strung together in a way that's more or less patterned, and because there's different qualities that you're experiencing as they're sequenced, you know, you kind of determine those patterns, and then based on those patterns, you form expectations, and you just go ahead. And then at some point, you're like, if I say, you know, every time I clap my hands, I say la la, la la, la la, la la, and then I go, what comes next? Well, la la. It's like you figured it out. There's a pattern there. It's a micro pattern in the stream of your consciousness. There you go. You can totally figure that out. And then, of course, if I mess up, which can happen if things can change, go la la, la la, la la, boop de doo. And that's what music is. It's like just giving you these hints at habits that you start to form. And right when you form them, they mess up with you a little bit. Because change the tempo all of a sudden. It's like boom, 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 doom, doom, doom. And it's like that we get a thrill out of being, you know, messed around by this artist who just messes with us, because they create little patterns, just enough for us to form a habit. And then they take our little habit and they put it somewhere else. And then your signs tell you what you expect them to mean. And then all of a sudden they don't. And then you recorrect that. And there's an art form. It's called music. It's like, that's a thing. And life is like a musical symphony of qualities that's streaming through your five senses. And then you just figure it out. And sometimes it's just music. It's fun. You don't care. There's nothing at stake. But other times you want to find, you know, the cause of what caused COVID. And it matters because folks are dying. And you're like, well, how are we going to figure that out? Well, how about you take everything you've learned. I take everything I've learned, and let's take everything we've learned. Let's pull it all together, and let's try to be wrong in a productive way that we can fine-tune and hammer away at our experiences. And that way, we'll understand what are the symptoms of this or whatever the signs of that, and we'll get to the truth. And what's the truth? That's what we're trying to figure out, right? And philosophically, you can tell what the truth with the capital T would be, even if in particular instances, no one actually might have a hold on it. And to have a hold on the truth is just to say it's worked out so far. There's no real reason to doubt this. It's pretty good, right? Does that philosophical gloss help people? I went on a bit of a caffeinated tirade there. Good. Owen writes, so in contrast to Descartes, he chose to stop at the breaking of his habit and stayed in firstness. Yeah, like Descartes you could think of as a person, because if you look at the meditations, Descartes says as much. Once I went to school and they taught me things. Then when I went in the world, I found out that the things they taught me weren't right. I don't trust anything anymore. My heart's been broken. No more knowledge for me. No more relationships. I'm going to go hide in a wood cabin. I figured it all out myself. I don't need all of y'all. No more authority. No more tradition. Screw you. It's like, yeah, okay. You can do that. You can do that. Do you understand? You can do that. But like, why would you? Why would you? It's like, yeah, it didn't work. Okay. Yeah. And some people do have that mindset, and philosophy attracts them. I'm sorry to say, right? And in relationships and in life in general, it's like, what do you do? Well, you just like, okay, look, man, we're going to go back to the drawing board, and that's it. And you just work at it together. We'll figure it out. Because guess what? I was, also like that, and so was everyone. That's the story of humanity. It's like, it's not just Descartes who underwent one time he was wrong. It's like, we're all wrong. It's like, get over yourself. We're all wrong all the time. It's like, okay, deep breaths, get over it. Next step. There's more for philosophy to do. And the way is not the way to out of this is not to sort of introspect, it's to look out, right? And a lot of people always says petition to replace Descartes with Peirce in Intro to Philosophy. A lot of people are thinking in general that, look, there's a reason why Peirce's star is rising. I mean, don't worry. In 1,000 years, if I had to bet, we'll see who gets spoken of more highly, right? We'll see. All right, so here's the sign. So remember the complicated, Descartes doesn't doubt himself. He just doubts everything else. Yeah, let's not do a course on Descartes. It's so sad. All right, so a sign is this specific triadic relation. So remember the complicated definition? There you have it. This is the simplified version. Okay, so remember that paragraph I told you, Collected Papers, Volume 2, was it paragraph 274? That's the definition of a sign. What we have here is a relation. It's a three-part relation. Notice there's three parts that you can plug in here. I want to plug the numbers 1, 2, and 3 for firstness, secondness, and thirdness. What would I plug here? 1, 2, or 3? Try again. Has to be an experience. Something stands for. It has to be something. Yeah. Yeah. 1, an experience, a firstness, something, right? Stands for something else. What would I put? Just to something else. So far, we're just here, right? Stands for something else. Just an else. A not one. Yeah. And of course, that's not enough, right? Stands for 3, right? And now 3, to stand for 2 just means, right? 3 can just use 1 to get to know 2. 3 doesn't actually have any relationship to 2. It has a relationship by proxy through the intermediary of the 2, right? So the way it works is you get to know the object of the sign through the sign. It is in virtue of the thing, right, that stands for the other thing that you know the other thing, right? Also, we need 2 to get to 3, but once we get to 3, we can get rid of 2. No one's getting rid of anything. So all these 3 parts have to go, because remember, it's a triadic relation. You dump one of these things and it doesn't work anymore. And Peirce likened this also to giving, right? You can think gives. 2. Think of giving. Giving is a genuine triadic relation. Try to give something without a gift, the person giving it and the person receiving the gift. Try that. You can't, right? So let's say your mom gives, right? Gives, let's just use gives for a second. Your mom gives something to. Let's try that. Your mom gives, so this is mom. Your mom gives a flower. Let's make it a 2-term relation. Your mom gives a flower. Does that make sense? Your mom gives a flower, full stop. Does that make sense? Like just a 2-term relation, gives a flower. No, you give a flower to. You can't just give a flower. There's something missing. You give a flower to. Okay? You give a flower to something. You can't just give a flower, right? Who do you give it to? If you give a flower, you give a flower to something, right? So same thing. To stand for to. That is the relation of the sign. Same thing as to give something to something else. It's a triadic relation. That is what a sign is, right? Is that helpful? Let me pause the giving thing. Can you see that? There's something that's passed on between a receiver and someone receiving it, right? Yeah. So here's a bunch of a definition here. Let's go back to our definition, right? A sign or representament is a first which stands in such a genuine triadic relation to a second called its object as to be capable of determining a third called its interpretant, to assume the same triadic relation to its object in which it stands itself to the same object. The triadic relation is genuine, that is, its three members are not bound together in a way that does not consist of any complexus of dyadic relations. This definition does not require an interpretant to be a modification of consciousness, and moreover, we talked about interpretability. It is not necessary that the interpretant should actually exist. A being in futuro will suffice. So I write on a paper, right? Imagine I write in the margins of a paper that no one's ever read. I write this. I write this in the margins. Let's say a student gives me a term paper. I write it and I write this. I write in the margins, right? According to Peirce, this thing in red here, is it a sign? The paper is, let's say the term paper on which I wrote this is in my office. No one's there right now. Reese says the correct answer. Why, Reese? In ordinary English, why is it a sign? Someone could read it and eventually would. And in futuro means in the future. If someone reads it, what we have right now, look at the quality. Be a phaneroscopist. What, strictly speaking, are you looking at right now here? What, strictly speaking, are you looking at? I mean, just without it standing for anything, what are we looking at right now, even on the screen? Not letters. Red. Just lay out red on white. Just red on white. That's all it is, right? It's a letter because what? Because it stands for something else. What does it stand for? Well, that's the object. And we all know it's not a good thing. Agreed? So screw you. It's an insult. Agreed? But it doesn't bear a natural relation to this object, right? It has to be interpreted. You need an interpretant, someone who's going to go, oh my God, how shameful. Someone wrote screw you in the margins. That's the interpretant. It's the thing that takes the representamen, right? Screw you, to stand for this object. That's the interpretant. And the interpretant needn't actually be there. It can be eventual. Eventually, someone could read this and take this as a sign of the object. Does everyone see that? It needn't be read. The interpretability suffices for it to be a sign. So a being in futuro will suffice, which is a crazy idea. And remember when I started the class, I said that Peirce was writing his papers and he was like, one day someone will read this, right? Well, forget the screw you. One day someone will read this. Okay, so let's do this again. What are we looking at right now? Be a phaneroscopist. Just describe what is it that we're looking at? What is on the screen right now? What's the visual experience you're having? If earlier was red on white, what are we looking at with our eyeballs? What's the visual experience? Black on white with some yellow. Yeah, just a bunch of figures, right? Well, what does that stand for, right? It stands for whatever the heck it's trying to get at. That's the target it's trying to reach. It's trying to get this object, right? You are the interpretant. This is our class is an interpretant of this representamen, and this entire thing is a sign. And it was a sign before 10 a.m. to this morning. And we're giving yet another interpretant, there's yet another manifestation that the sign is being interpreted, right? And Peirce was generating these signs, and they had an object. They stand for something more than themselves. This sheet is not just a sheet of scribblings. It stands for, it's meticulously crafted to stand for something, and it's waiting to be interpreted. And then we go, yeah, I understand what Peirce meant. And your understanding, your ability to write papers, my ability to talk about it, just are further interpretants and manifestations that we know how to connect this representamen, right? Or as we'll call it often, the sign vehicle, the thing that's the conveyor of meaning, right? We're able to connect it to the object, and we generate interpretants precisely by being in a proper relationship to that object. The thing is orienting us towards whatever it wants to orient us to, right? So again, it is really cool, Owen. This is an attorney. It's representing its client. What's its client? Well, its client is whatever is this passage, this entire thing is trying to say. It stands for that thing. And we're having our dealings with, right, the attorney. And to have the dealings with the attorney just is that we are in an immediate way, not in an immediate way, but in an immediate way, put into contact with the client, the thing that it's standing for. The attorney stands for its client. Now, right, so could the representamen be an interpretant too? Yes. The answer is yes, Nav. That's a great observation. These poles, this is super important, a terrific observation, Nav. Do not prejudge what you put in here. It can move around. All right. So for instance, earlier I said your mother gives a flower to someone, right? Someone could give your mother to a slave owner, right? Likewise, something stands for something to something else, right? That everything can be switched around. You can have different things that can pop up here. So I can say, right, gold, right, stands for buying ability, let's say, to whoever interprets it, right? To, I don't know, consumers or whatever. I don't know what to write here, right? So gold is just gold. Do we agree? Gold is just gold. It's just gold, man. But it's taken to stand for an ability to do stuff by consumers, right? And then I said gold by consumer. We can mess around with that stuff, right? You can say that my ability to buy things can be your indication that I've got lots of gold, right? This way. You can say, well, he's able to buy all this stuff. He must have all this gold or something like that. And again, to something else. To what? Well, I don't know, right? You can plug in whatever. And that's revealed in the patterns of behavior, the habits that one is prepared to take. You saw me buy a bunch of stuff. You expect me to have a lot of gold. You're willing to trust me that if you ask for a loan, I'll actually lend you some money because I actually have money to lend or something like that. You can all move this around. The sign is the relation, this triadic relation, not the stuff in the relation, not the relata. Just a relation. Yeah. So what we have then, if we're trying to build a model of the sign, now, right, so it's still kind of two different events or phenomena. Yeah, each sign is different in its own way, right? What we have then is the following, right? Often you'll see this mistaken model. This is often, I'll start with the mistaken model because it's arguably more intuitive, right? The sign stands for an object to an interpreter. This is the mistaken model, but I think it's the easiest model for you to grasp. A sign is something that stands for an object to an interpreter, right? So the interpreter gets to know the object via the sign. The interpreter has a, let me type in here, because it's not a bad model so far as it goes, but it's mistaken if we're going to do this at a university level. The arrow in red that I wrote, right? This is a mediate relation, right? The interpreter has a mediate relation to the object. The sign has an immediate relation to its object, let's say, right? And so it is by virtue of the sign that you get to know the object, and you have a immediate relation to the object, even though you have a immediate relation to the sign, right? Remember, when we're looking at the water, you have an immediate relation to the sign, but it stands for something more than itself, namely its drinkability. So your visual inputs stand for, in this case, gustatory inputs, right? That's not a bad model so far as it goes, but I want you to discard this model and adopt a more sophisticated model, right? This would be the model. This is the correct model. let me flash back and forth, and let's list in the chat bar what are the differences between the two. So I'm going to go, let's say 5 seconds on one, 5 seconds on the other, and go back and forth. And I want you to contrast these two models, and I want you to tell me what's the difference. I want you to discover for yourself the difference between these two models. There are 3 important differences. So if you come up with 3, you should be good. But this only the ones you find. Speed up the contrast to see if that works even better. Yeah, and you can just, without interpreting it too much, just tell me dumbly just what's the difference, right? Spot the difference. Yeah. Yeah, Ariana. So just, yeah, Nav says a cycle creates a relationship, correct? Those are, Nav and Reese are overthinking it a little bit, so do Arjun. Just give me the dumb differences first, and then we'll understand what those differences actually unpack as. You're on the right track, Arjun, Reese, and Nav, but you're overthinking it. My request is even more stupid. Ariana's got 1. The shape, one is a triangle, the other is a T. Does everyone see that? T, triangle. Let's just do that one at a time. All right. So you might think, what's the big deal? What's the big deal? Here's the big deal. Remember what we said about the strict definition of the sign. A sign is not reducible to a complexus of dyadic relations. This diagram here says that the sign and the interpreter have a dyadic relation to one another. That is a 2-term relation. That the sign and the object have a 2-term relation, and that the object and the interpreter have a 2-term relation. Now, it's obvious, especially from this one, that you cannot have a 2-term relation between an interpreter and an object. You have to go through the sign to get to the object. Otherwise, this is not a sign. It's just a sheer experience, right? You're just having an experience, and you're not an interpreter. This distinction would collapse. You're not interpreting anything, right? So remember the definition. Let me go back to the strict definition of the sign, right? Let me just zoom in here. The triadic relation is genuine in that its 3 members are bound together in a way that does not consist in any complexus of dyadic relations. It's not just adding, 2-term relations together to get a 3-term relation. It is a genuinely triadic relation. This forces you to be a genuinely dyadic relation, a triadic relation. Does everyone see that? The T is actually a preferable way. It would be a T, or you draw it slightly differently, right? It could be kind of curved like this or something like that, but you have to have that. Otherwise, it would be like, it'd have to kind of look like this. Like, it's really just, it has to be a 3-term relation. Do you see that? The triangle doesn't do it, because you can have sides on their own, right? The triangle allows you to cut 1 step out. That's right. The triangle says you could imagine all this is gone, right? And that there's some sort of relation here. Each line stands for a relation. Look, the interpreter doesn't have a 1-to-1 relation, like just a relation just with the sign. There's no way. If you have a relationship with the sign, you thereby have a relationship with an object. If you think screw you is a sign, then you understand its object. If it's not just red on white, then already you can project out what it's intending you to think about, the object it's directing you towards, the other thing it's standing for. Right? So going back to the example that we had earlier, right? If you plug in here, whatever, a piece of language that you recognize as language, then clearly you already discern that it stands for more than itself, right? As opposed to like if you just see something written, just a drawing, right? Or something like that, that you don't think stands for something else, although the drawing itself could stand for something else as well, right? Let's pause at that. Do you see the difference and the importance of that difference in this model? This is the mistaking. Can everyone see the difference between the T and the triangle? Why the T is better? The moment you draw one, right, this is a relation that immediately puts you, and one of the reasons, by the way, and when we do a little bit of logic, maybe we'll glimpse at this. Remember Peirce said he couldn't express these ideas with the infantile logic of his age, all right? All right, so if you've done logic, you know what a relation of identity is, right? If you've done some logic, or if you've done a little bit of philosophy, the relation of identity is a relation between, let's say, A is identical to B. Okay, fine. That is not what the sign is saying. The sign is saying something that's not just a two-term relation. The sign is saying it's a three-term relation, right? Well, it's not a question that A is identical to B, B is identical to C, therefore A is identical to C. It is not what's going on, right? Because this is now a complexus of dyadic relations. Is there a term, Peirce said, for identities involving three things? And he had to literally invent a word because the logics don't have that term. The only identity relations that logic recognizes are two-term identity relations. And for Peirce, he wanted a three-term identity relation. And for what it's worth, this T in logic, this is just an aside, right, is called teridentity. Teridentity. Identity between three things, right? A relation between three things. He had to literally invent a term for it because you didn't have, if you will, enough complexity in the vocabulary to even represent the relation he was talking about. So in that triangle model, if you get rid of the bottom connection, does that make it true then? No, nothing happens. If I get rid of any of these things, so let's just put something here. All right, let me put actually something very intuitive, right? So, holy cow. Let's put that over here. Let's imagine that I'm going to now delete this. Let me have some fun. I'm going to grab myself something that resembles an eraser, and I delete this just for kicks. Okay, you interpret holy cow as meaning what? So holy cow here, I'm just meaning this red holy cow I put on the white. Okay, I interpret holy cow. I interpret holy cow as meaning what? Complete that sentence. Do you understand? There needs to be something more. Can everyone see that? I interpret holy cow as meaning what? I interpret it as meaning something, right? And the something is, right, this. Let's go back to, I erased my holy cow. I'm going to redo a holy cow. Actually, let's do something else just for kicks. Let's write something else. I'm going to write over here. Actually, let me do a little more cleaning up here. I'm going to replace this with, oh, that's not what I want. I'm going to replace this over here with, let me put my holy cow. It's going to be even cleaner than I did a moment ago. All right, let me put holy cow. Holy cow. Holy cow, which is an expression, right? All right, cool. Now we can delete another part. We're going to have some fun and see how that works out. So why this model is telling you that you can do things that you can't do. All right, how about this? Does holy cow stand for an object without any interpretation? Does it stand for anything apart from anyone interpreting it ever? Like holy cow, it's an exclamation. It's like heck no. It's just like, okay, you remove that. It's now dumb. If you remove the part I just did, this is just some dumb thing in the world, right? This is now just this holy cow thing that I'm circling. Do we agree it still exists, but it's not a sign? It bears no relation to an object. It's just, here we go. It's just some further dumb thing in the world, right? To be related to an object, you have to be interpreted. Does everyone see that? So if I remove this, I'm screwed? That doesn't make any sense. I can't do that. I'm trying all three sides of the triangle. All right, cool. All right, so now let's do the last side that I'm going to remove. All right, so let's imagine this. I got you to think of an object. Which one? I'm not even presenting you with a sign. You ready? Direct your mind. Be about what I want you to be about something. I'm not going to say anything. So watch out in the chat bar, everyone. I'm going to direct you to an object. Are you ready? Type in ready if you're ready. In the chat bar, I'm going to write something, and it's going to direct you to an object. You're going to interpret what I'm going to write, and it's going to direct you to an object. Is everyone ready? Okay, drum roll, please. Here it comes. I'm not emitting any signs. I'm not putting anything. How's that working out for you? Did you get the object? Are you getting there? Are you about? Or is it, how are you interpreting that? Are you there? Are you there yet? It's not working out. Agreed. It's like it's not going to work out, right? Mark's got to put something over here, right? You can't do it. It doesn't make any sense. Now let's look at this model over here, right? The moment you have a sign vehicle, look, you've just already, me, you're in a relation. You're a triple relation. You're in a triadic relation here. The arrow that's leading out is the arrow, this black line, that's a relation. And it's already put you in a relationship with these two other things. To have one is to have the other two. To have one is to have the other two. To have one is to have the other two. If you interpret, then there's something you interpret as standing for something. If something makes sense to you, it's because you interpret something as standing for it, and something stands for something in virtue of being interpreted. So that's the triangle versus the T. Was that helpful? Can we all see why the correct model is correct and the mistaken one's mistaken? What he meant by the complexus of dyadic relations. Can everyone see that? That's one difference, right? So we got one difference. I said there's three differences. Cool. All right. So what's the next difference? So let's just go back and forth. What's another difference? Sign versus sign vehicle. Good catch, John. All right, let's do that. So why are we calling, this goes back to, I think it was Andrew's question originally, right? Peirce himself wasn't as clear as one would hope on this, right? Luckily, he used the word representamen. The term we're going to use for the thing that occupies this role over here, the term that we're going to adopt, it's not a term that you find in Peirce, right? It's a term that you find in Charles Morris, another semiotician that came after Peirce, but it's the term that's been widely adopted, is sign vehicle, the thing that conveys, right? The sign vehicle, that's the word that we're going to use, not sign, right? Because you can't have a sign on its own. The true sign is this entire thing. This is the sign, because you can't, as we've seen, have one part without the other, right? So this is the sign. The sign is the whole shebang. The sign vehicle, that's the thing that is foregrounded in the position of the first, the experience that's allowing the interpretant to be by proxy of that sign vehicle related to the object. So we're going to call that the sign vehicle because it's just a part, not the whole. The whole is this. So you don't want to suffer from a part-whole fallacy here. The sign would actually be the whole thing, not the part. Because again, there is no such thing as a sign. I'm about to do something here that makes absolutely no sense. All right? I'm going to take this. I'm going to, let me grab my eraser here. I'm going to remove everything. Can you have a sign without any object or any interpretant? Just a sign. Without any of the things I put. Hey, look, that's just a sign. Does that make any sense? It's not a sign of anything. It's just a sign. It makes no sense. Agreed. It makes no sense. Now it's a dumb thing in the world. You do this, it's a dumb thing in the world. It's not a sign. It has a right to be a dumb thing in the world, by the way. Nothing wrong with that. Dumb things in the world are fine, right? Your stop sign that you stop when you have a car, when you're driving a car, it's a dumb thing in the world too, at the same time that it's a sign, right? So you have a stop sign, and the stop sign is, it's trying to get you to stop, and the interpretant is your habit of action. What do you do when you see a stop sign? What's your habit of action normally? What happens to your right ankle when you see it? You stop. And that's what it wants you to do. It's trying to direct you to this halting, right? Please halt. And you, in point of fact, you recognize that it's telling you to halt by halting. It's like, there you go. That's what you do. But it's also some dumb thing in the world. Do we agree? Like a stop sign is still a metal thing on a pole. It's a dumb thing in the world. It's just some dumb thing in the world. And it has a right to be some dumb thing in the world. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's more than just a dumb thing in the world. And the world is like that. It's a bunch of dumb things, but dumb events, these secondnesses, these brute things that are occupying a lot of space and in time, right? And that's it. Does the Farad exercise and this is the same thing? What's the Farad exercise? I'm not sure. So a sign can only exist in the context of its meaning, otherwise it can't. Yeah, exactly right, Arjun. What you said only exists because it has a meaning. It says if it has no meaning, there's no sign. Yeah. Well, the ferret. Yeah, exactly. The ferret, right? The ferret's just, again, you couldn't pinpoint the object, but at least you knew. So here's the ferret, all right? So will you ferret me? Thank you. Sorry, Nav, my things I do in class are so silly that even I don't remember them sometimes. All right, so here you go, right? Will you, what was it? Ferret me, or ferry me. Ferry, that's what it was. Will you ferry me? All right. So you know enough, right? If you encounter this, if you know enough, if someone says, will you ferry me, that this is supposed to be a sign. You can't pinpoint the object yet, but now you've begun a process of trying to pinpoint what the heck it's about. Right? So will you, it was Fafi, not Fairy, you're right, Fafi. Well, it's a made-up word anyways, right? So let's just go for it. Arjun, it makes no sense, right? You're correcting me on the made-up word anyways, right? Will you Fafi me? Hopefully Fafi doesn't mean something, right? You know that this is enough, like it's sandwiched between familiar things enough for you to know that this is something, right? And now you're like, this part I know, this part's puzzling, this part I know. And I know the grammar that links together this entire sentence. This is a question. I'm trying to figure out its object, but I know that it has an object. So there's a bullseye here that I'm trying to aim at. Okay, what the heck is it? And this brings me to some of the nuances, right? Notice here, semiosis, that's the action of signs. That's the thing that happens when you interpret a sign. That's the thing that signs do, right? Semiosis begins with the guess. Every concept, doubtless, first arises upon a strong but more or less vague sense of need, when a sense of need is superinduced in some involuntary experience of a subjective nature. We may assume that it is the same with the instinctive ideas of animals, and man's ideas are quite as miraculous as those of the bird, the beaver, and the ant. In such animals, however, conditions are comparatively unchanging, and there's no further progress. With humans, these first concepts take the form of conjectures, though they're by no means always recognized as such. Every concept, every general proposition of the great edifice of science first came to us as a conjecture. These ideas are the first logical interpretants of the phenomena that suggested them. All right, so semiosis begins with the guess. All right, so you're going to try to get to the object of this sign. Will you fafi me? What the heck does that mean? And then you're going to make a guess. And what's the guess going to be? The guess is going to be revealed in the actions you'll undertake, and those actions will either going to work or not work. If they don't work, you guess again. Right? But you know enough to know that this is a sign. It's not just some dumb thing in the world because it's sandwiched in between all this other stuff. And you start with a conjecture. You start with a guess. Likewise, right, when you first saw the water, right? And there was a time when you first saw the water. What the heck is this? What the heck does it taste like? Well, it's, who knows? Guess and try. And if you're wrong, then you're wrong. No big deal. Right? The same thing, will you ferry me? Right? Same thing. But you know enough to know that this is a sign because you know that it has to have an object, and that doesn't change the model if you don't know which object it is. Does everyone see that distinction? To know that it must have an object, you don't require to know exactly what the object is. Like when we didn't understand Egyptian hieroglyphics, we knew they were signs of something else. They had an object. We just didn't know what they were. You see that distinction? You needn't be absolutely correct to know that you're trying to aim for correctness. You can aim without necessarily succeeding. And you know that this sign is an invitation to interpret it, right? Egyptian hieroglyphics, by the way, weren't interpreted until the 19th century. And we were just looking at them, but we know they weren't just dumb things in the world. We know they were more than just dumb things in the world, because they were like scribbled by humans and clearly with some sort of intention or code behind them. And we just didn't know what the heck they meant, but we knew that they had an object, even though we didn't know which object they had. Does that nuance make sense? This model allows you to know that a sign has an object, even if it doesn't require you to know which object it has. This is like a really important nuance. Yeah. Nav writes, in the water example, you could label which is the sign vehicle to interpret in the object. Yeah, you could totally do that. These roles here, these labels, you can go around now and you can study all of your experience from the moment you wake up to the moment you're going to go to sleep tonight and see how it's a dance between these three poles all the time. Like right now, I'm making sound with my voice. What's the sound with my voice? Just a sound. La, 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 my voice. Can everyone hear my voice? What is it? Sign, vehicle, interpretant, or object? Yeah, and use the strict expressions we have on the board right now. Sign, vehicle. That's right. It's a vehicle. It carries something. What does it carry? It carries some sort of meaning. It's about something. What is it about? Give me the other technical term for what it is that it stands for. It stands for, because remember, it's standing for two, right? It stands for the object. What am I talking about? So here, everyone ready? I'm going to make a noise. Is everyone ready? I'm going to make a noise. Say ready in the chat bar. I'm going to utter a noise. All right, go. You ready? Everyone pay attention. I'm going to make a sound. And it's just a dumb brute sound in the world. You understand? My microphone right now, it's a dumb machine. It doesn't know what it's recording. It's just recording sound waves. I'm going to give you a sound wave. I'm going to emit air, and it's going to have a pattern, and my sound recorder is going to convey it to you. All right, you ready? Elephant. What am I talking about? What am I talking about? Elephant. Is that the sign, vehicle, the object? Right. Elephant. You can think elephant. Think of it phonetically, right? Elephant. What am I talking about? I'm talking about an elephant, right? I'm talking about an elephant. Now, who knows that elephant, the sound, stands for an elephant? You know, the bloody elephants, big things, which I can't produce, by the way. I don't have one right now, but we're talking about elephant, an elephant. You know, the animal, good old animal, makes big poops, like big ears, has a trunk, right? And who's connecting this sound with that thing? Well, the interpretant. The interpretant just is, you're now thinking about an elephant, which I, by the way, directed you towards elephants. You have no choice. I'm in control of your semiosis right now. I'm controlling your thoughts. Hey, everyone, I'm controlling your thoughts. Popcorn. Spare rib. I'm controlling your thoughts. Isn't it cool? I'm totally in control. Yeah. All right, so let's put the lake, the water, and the habit. All right, so let's put the lake. That's cool. Let's do that. All right. Looks watery. Tastes watery. I expect the watery looking thing to taste watery. Andrew, you like that one? There's an experience that looks watery. I take it to stand for tasting watery. And my standing for is revealed in the fact that I expect and stand ready for the watery thing, the watery looking thing, to taste watery. Yeah. Owen writes, so I guess it gets fun when the interpreter is completely different from the norm. Yeah, well, there's the thing. When you have an unprecedented event, so here's what happens, right? We receive a signal from space, or an alien stands, or, you know, some surprising thing happens in the world, right? And we're like, what the F even? And we're like, we don't know what to do, but we know we have to interpret this phenomenon, right? We know we have to interpret it. It stands for something more. It's like a UFO or something, right? It's like, this stands for something more, but what even is it? Well, the UFO is a thing you can take with a picture, but what does it stand for? So UFO is over here. It's just an unidentified, and I love the unidentified flying object. You haven't identified it, so you don't know what it has an object, but you know it's not nothing, and that can be recorded on a camera, but what it is actually is up for grabs. What the heck is this? And we're all trying to figure that out, right? Those of whoever's interested in this, right? But it can be caught on camera. Okay, but then there's debate. What did you catch on camera? And we're trying to figure that out. But that goes for everything. That's life in general. Stuff presents itself in experience that always messes us up, and we're always like trying to pinpoint it. Yeah. And Nav writes, I'm sorry, but I'm still confused what is the sign, vehicle. Okay, so let's go. Let's go back to what I was saying. Nav, let's do the sand. Is everyone for the sand? We're going to do the sand. All right, so Looks watery. Nav, so far so good. Just looks watery. Good? I just put in, it looks watery. Right? And remember a moment ago what I said was, I expect the watery looking thing to taste watery. So what object do I think that this is putting me in touch with? So if I expect the watery looking thing to taste watery, what do I think I'm in touch with? What is it that I think I'm in touch with? With water, right? I think I'm in touch with a watery, with good old water, right? I've got this water taste. I'm expecting a water taste. That's what I'm expecting to have, right? All right, cool. And so on the basis of that, I go ahead and I have a disposition to act a certain way. I, without hesitation, put it in my mouth. We saw what happens when you do that. If it's the sand, if it turns out I'm wrong, what happens? Okay. What happens if I have that expectation? Again, sorry, folks, I didn't want to do a quiz here. No, there's no poll. I'm not polling anyone. What happens? And here you go. Let me just go back to that slide. Right, there you have it. It tastes this way. It turns out I'm wrong. That expectation, I took it to stand for something else, but signs don't always tell the truth. Signs don't always tell the truth. And the distinction between illusion and reality just is, right, the real and the unreal just is the habits that we form that don't go frustrated. And then the illusory just is these experiences that we would normally assume to be standing for something else, which will fool us once in a while, but not in the long run, because in the long run, we would not be fooled. Remember what I said earlier? Let's go back to that. And we'll slowly wrap up, but this is really helpful. I think we've done everything we wanted to accomplish, right? If we need water, we would not go here in the long run, right? And so we would know in the long run as a community to expose ourselves enough to experience and know that that's not a sign of water, right? If you know it's a mirage, like when I asked, people knew it was a mirage because you've all somehow learned either from firsthand experience or secondhand testimony, this is not a lake. If you're dying and you need water, do not head in that direction and expect to find water. If you need water, do not go there, right? Nav, is that helpful? And the interpretance is the action that you take. That's right. The interpretance is the thing, the difference that makes a difference. Signs make a difference in the world. They make a difference by altering the course of the differences that they make. But a lawyer can, by the way, misrepresent. You think it was you were talking on behalf of someone, but it can be about, yeah, cool. Owen writes, this is not a sign of water until you experience confirms that it's not water. Well, it's a sign of water, but it's not. It's mistaken, right? So if it looks watery, but it turns out to be a mirage. So let me put this in red over here, right? It turns out it's a mirage. It still looks watery insofar as they go, right? Let's say it's a mirage. It still looks watery. Mirages do look watery. They're deceiving for a reason. Yeah. And so you're going to be expecting to find a thing, but it turns out it's wrong. So it's like, all right, so do you ever, like you're about to take the bus, let's say, and you normally put your bus card in the right-hand pocket. And normally when you put your hand in the right-hand pocket of your pants, you feel the thing, you take it out and you just tap. It's unthinking. It's like I'm taking the bus, you hop on, you're done with your classic APU, and you go and you tap and you take the bus. We haven't done that for a long time because it's quarantine, but you know, you've done that, right? And then you go in, there's nothing in your pocket. What happens? You freak. But when you were beginning to slide your hand inside your pocket, looking for your card, your bus card, you expected it to be there. Turns out you were wrong. When you ended up in your pocket was empty and you don't have your bus card with you. But you were expecting, you had a habit, and you were acting in a way that you thought was going to pan out, and it didn't. And then what do? Then you're plunged into inquiry. You start searching your duffel bag. You start searching the other pocket. You start making new guesses. You're trying to figure stuff out. That happens all the time. So the entire story that we had in epistemology ties into this. Everything we said still holds. Yeah, everything we said still holds. It's still applicable and it finds its proper place. The course will consist in you meditating on how all of these parts hang together, and that can take like, I don't know, maybe, half a century. So it's okay if you don't see all the relations between all the parts, but this is a system of philosophy. So far, okay, we did 2 differences out of 3. What's the last difference? So I'm going to contrast these 2 models. Mistaken model, correct model. So far we did T versus triangle, sign vehicle versus sign. Interpretant and interpreter, thank you. All right, this is a big deal. Interpretant versus interpreter. An interpretant isn't an interpreter. An interpreter is a thing with a kidney. An interpreter is a full-on agent. An interpretant is a habit of action. It's an act. It's a difference in the world and the way things are. It's just a finer notion. It's not as coarse-grained, right? So for instance, if I interpret the water as being the water-looking thing as being watery tasty, the interpretant just consists in my readiness to plunge my head in it. I wouldn't plunge my head in the sand, but if it's a watery looking thing and it looks like fresh water, I would plunge my head in it. It's an action, not an actor. So you can make that distinction here. Let me type that in, right? It's a big distinction. A actor brings in a lot of baggage. And remember, Peirce is a logician, and he doesn't want to have an actor because an actor presupposes so much. And he doesn't need it in his model. He wants to make this as parsimonious as possible. He just wants to put what he actually needs. What he needs are an action or actions, as the case may be. A single action would suffice. Further actions, habitual in the more developed sense, are terrific, right? But that's all he needs. An interpretant is an action. Now, perhaps an action of an interpreter, fair enough, but he doesn't require that. And what that means is his model can be adapted to all sorts of things that aren't humans. Because we normally think we're the ones in charge of science. We're the interpreters. That's the Cartesian picture. There's something special about us humans, right? We are the bestowers of meaning, right? If it's only in virtue of us that things have meaning and so on. We're these human subjects, and we are the things that give the brute, dumb things in the world significance, and the world has no significance apart from us. It's like, that's not the picture that Peirce paints. The picture that Peirce paints is just, you have to have some sort of action. It has to make a difference, right? And you might think of an action as making a difference. That's a very kind of non-committal way of understanding what it means to do an action. It's like, all right, so making, because it's called pragmatism, right? Has to make a difference. Did you ever take an action that didn't make a difference? Think about that for a second. Made no difference in the world. Someone acted, but it made no difference in the world. Does that make any sense? No difference whatsoever. Yeah. And so the idea is to make a difference, right? It doesn't even need to, you don't have to read in the baggage of intentional action here, right? There's no need for intent. This is all extra baggage. And as a good logician, you know never to put more baggage than you actually need. Don't burden this model with more weight than it needs to carry. It can carry humans eventually, but ultimately, what you call yourself. So Owen, John, Andrew, Arjun, Nav, everyone, you're a fabric of signs. You're not this independent thing. It's not like, for instance, you know, you are part of this model. No, the model is the fabric out of which you're made. These signs here, that's the fabric out of which you are made, right? So for instance, if someone says, "What's up, Mark?" "Hey, Mark." "Hey, Mark." Someone screams out, "Mark, Mark," right? What happens? Well, I take that to stand for what? My bloody name. Right? I take that to stand for my name. It's not just a dumb thing in the world. I'm so bloody habituated to it, right? Oh, sorry, my Mark. I'm tired here. It's just my name, right? I take that to be my name, and that's revealed in my readiness to act a certain way. Look, someone screams "Peter" in this, I don't turn around. Well, maybe I turn around because it surprised me. But if someone says "Mark," I'll turn around, and my action makes a difference in the world. This relationship here is revealed by this relationship here. The relationship of the sign vehicle to the object precisely consists in my turning around, my standing readiness to make a difference. For some other people, it would just be some brute thing in the world, right? So that's why we're talking about an interpretant, which is an action, not an interpreter, which is an actor. And what we call a human subject or a full-on subject is actually built out of an aggregation of these things. If you kind of construct who you are, right, over a collection of all of these things. Like if you were to zoom in, that's an individual fiber, but you'll have a whole shirt called you, and it's made of all these little signs, right? And what you call you is the bundle of all of the things you're ready to do in light of the experience you undergo. And where that begins and ends is actually not as clear-cut as you would imagine, right? So for instance, scratch my car, that's my car. It's me, it's a part of me. Who I am, the boundaries of what I am extend out into the world to the things I own. And if anyone doubts that, well, try living without your stuff, for instance, right? Who you are as an interpreter, as a full-on person, includes your clothes, includes your hair. If I rip off your clothes and take all your stuff and shave off your hair, you know, you want that thing to be part of who you are. And that's just a network of habitual actions. Like these things are part of who you've constructed yourself as being, right? So you don't want to have an interpreter there. That's a much bigger, larger scale, a more macroscopic thing. And here we're at a much finer scale, and we don't burden that with that. We want to say interpretant at the risk of having to coin a technical term just for that. Does that make sense? That's the final clarification. And it means that also all living things use science, by the way, right? There's no need to have an interpreter in the demanding sense of something with a consciousness, an education, a social insurance number. It's like, no, amoeba interpret. It's like, yeah, squirrels, it's all good. There's science coursing throughout the whole world, man. It's like, yeah. So you don't have to, in person, you don't have to worry about like whales singing to each other. Man, they sing, huh? Whales sing just fine without us in the bloody ocean. Without any marine biologist looking at them, there's science coursing throughout the ocean, right? It's a wondrous place filled with science. My friends, let's pause on that. Was that clear? And I just want to end with one quote, actually. This is a quote for the team. To be in a relation to X and to be in a relation to X mean the same thing. Relation to a relation. To be in a relation to a relation brings you into relation with the thing that was related. To be in a relation to X, right? The sign vehicle is in a relation to X, and you're in a relation with the relation to the sign vehicle. That puts you in a relationship to X. To be in a relation to something and to be in a relation to the relation to this thing mean the same thing. Again, very complicated idea, but very wide-ranging, right? Good. All right, so nuances to keep in mind. The last one I want to flag, and this is for your reading on your own, right? It's this one. I'm just going to read the title. Because signs are genuinely triadic, their three parts can never really be separated. And so what you do when you pretend that you're talking about, because at the end of the day, if this is one thing, how can we be talking about three parts? We're separating them, if you will, methodologically, but not really. And that's called something called precision or precisive analysis, right? Even though they're always bound together, you can kind of see that there's these three poles to it, even though you can't have one existing without the other. And watch out, in the reading, it ends with that warning. And finally, because a lot of folks are probably like, oh my God, this is like so complicated, right? And it's true. This rigorous analysis of the sign is removed from folk semiotics. And folk semiotics is your ordinary understanding that a stop signal is a sign in and of itself, apart from anything, right? Which is obviously manifestly wrong. But he says, I wish philosophy to be a strict science, passionless and severely fair. I know very well that science is not the whole of life, but I believe that the division of labor among intellectual agencies, the little that I have contributed to pragmatism has been entirely the fruit of this outgrowth from formal logic and is worth much more than the small sum total of the rest of my work, as time will show. And this is him saying, you keep studying this, it'll keep paying dividends. It's just a matter of time. And he understands that it'll take time. It'll take time for all of humanity to understand his work. That applies to you too. It'll take time for you to understand. But this vision of what it means to mean is insanely productive. Like, you won't believe, if you keep digging at this, how much you'll pull out. It's just so completely bloody interesting. And I'm excited to be introducing it to you. All right. Dude is like 500 years ahead of his time. Oh, you have no clue, Owen. You have no clue. He is an alien. I mean, he's just not, he's from another world. It's like, who the hell knows? The world, according to Peirce, as you'll see near the end when we wrap up with the cosmology, is not the world that you're familiar with. It's an insanely fascinating world where it's not just brute physical happenings, like according to law. Like, for instance, we think of particles hitting one another. You have this picture in reality that you have in Descartes, where everything is just extended space, and there's these particles that hit each other according to deterministic law, And then somehow there's these ghosts that witness this. That's like, and the ghosts are like our minds. It's like, that's not the picture you get in Peirce. The picture you get in Peirce is a world that's overlaid with relations. Some of those relations growing and determining further relations that become meaningful, that can then turn around and affect the world and change it because it's now, and it's like, you'll get a worldview, trust me, put it on a shelf. It'll be insanely different. Yeah. So let's cross some items on our main list here. All right, so what have we learned today? Look at the section on philosophy of signs. We've learned representamen, which we also call what? So the representamen is not a term that we're going to use. We're going to replace it with another term, the thing that stands for the other stuff to something else. We're going to change that for another term. Not interpreter, certainly not interpreter. Sign vehicle, yeah. All right, so that's Peirce's term, but on this one occasion, we're going to change it for sign vehicle. The object is the thing that the sign vehicle stands for, and the interpretant is the thing that is standing for too. So if we go back to that picture that we saw, let me just plug in those words right there. Remember when I said the simplified model, something stands for two. All right, we can put it on the diagrammatic model, but we can also put it on this simplified model, right? So let me just type this in. All right, here we go. Sign vehicle stands for object two, bring it home. Stands for object two. What's the third thing in this position? Interpret it. Yeah. That's it. There you go. And so what we have are these terms now that we've learned. Let me just zoom back in. We've learned those. That's terrific, right? And that's going to equip you to do the reading. Semiosis is not a term that we've encountered, but you'll see it in the reading. Semiosis is the thing that signs do. When they put you in touch with the object, that's called semiosis, right? The thing of getting to know the client via the attorney, right? My dealings with the attorney put me in touch with the client. My people will deal with your people. My people get in touch with your people. That's semiosis, right? Getting to know the watery taste from the watery look, that's semiosis. And precision, this is a term that you'll have in the reading that we didn't look at. It's this artificial separation of the three parts, which in fact always have to be present, right? So we can't actually separate them because as we tried the experiment. If you separate one, it doesn't make any sense anymore. They all have to collaborate together. Next week, what we're doing is now arguably the hardest part. We're going to say, okay, in this model of the sign, what are the different varieties of sign relations? Yeah. And next week, we're going to talk about the midterm, Mariana. Next week, we'll talk about the midterm. Yeah, that'll be the first order of business when we start class. Yeah. Yeah. And so remember for the midterm, so this is we're going to figure out what are these different relations we're going to create. We're going to sort of determine different kinds of them and different kinds of them. There's going to be all sorts of different kinds. That's what we're doing next week. All right. For the midterm, remember, what are you held accountable to? You're held accountable for all of the Peirce packets, nothing more, nothing less, and everything that happens from the moment I say hello to the moment I say goodbye. What must you do now? Well, you reread Peirce packet 5. I couldn't read the whole thing with you. There are parts you have to read on your own, and rereads are really important because it's not obvious on first read, and that's okay. I've made it as clear as it gets, but it's still difficult. But with great difficulty also comes great reward. It's an amazingly sort of fertile philosophical subject matter. And you write your proof and you submit your fourth entry anytime before next class. I'll have a look at your third entries. And next week, we wrap up Philosophy of Science, Part 3. And it's culminating, like I'm presuming next week that you've understood what we did this week and the week before. So everything at each step, like today we use firstness, secondness, thirdness. That was stuff we introduced last week. So it's going to keep building on one another. All right, so stay on top of your stuff. On that note, let me ask, is everything clear? If everything is crystal clear, you know what you got to do. You got lots of work, but you got to do it because we have to do. Tell me it's clear, and if you got a question, ask your question. For now, everybody else, Curtis, whatever. It's like, remember, I created a forum. So if you want to go, you can go in there, and I can browse once in a while, and I can join in if there's a recurring theme that you're stuck on. You can nudge me, and I'll go and I'll help you out and untie the knot. Peirce writes, for me, it's the simultaneous description and abstraction of a lot of concepts that are taken granted day to day. That's so true. The stuff that we take, the stuff closest to us is the stuff that's hardest to see, right? And so it's really hard to take stock because of you're living in a world of habits. So Curtis and everybody else, maybe we can end on that note. Remember when I said the interpretant is the material out of which you, the person, the interpreter, a full-on person is built. You're just a network of habits. And your habits are precisely useful because you don't have to attend to them. And the world makes, most of the time, lots of sense, right? And when it breaks down, then you realize, holy crap, I take so much for granted. Like, if you ever had an accident or you're sick, all of a sudden you feel like telling your loved ones you love them. But as soon as you're healthy, you take them for granted and you treat them like shit. I'm sorry to say, but it's true. That's the human condition. We're morons. We always do this. It's only at the point of, like, when someone announces you they got cancer that you're like, now I want to spend time with you. Well, what the hell is wrong with us? Like, spend time with the ones you love now while they're healthy. Don't wait till they call you and tell you they're sick and they're on their deathbed or they're checking into the hospital with COVID-19, that all of a sudden you realize how much they matter to you. And that's the way we are with everything. We take things for granted all the time. And that's good and that's bad. And philosophy can't take that for granted. Philosophy is the attempt to precisely turn around and take stock of our human condition in its full plenitude and to make sense of it. And it's hard. It's hard precisely because we're so used to being in this ordinary attitude, this common sense attitude of dealing with the world and taking everything for bloody granted. We can't see that when we hear music, there really just is sound, right? On some level. We fail to see that. But when it's just sound, we can't understand also that it could be taken as music, and we don't see these things because we're just humans and we take the world for granted in the same way that a squirrel takes the world for granted from its squirrel-like perspective. And it never stops to think why we have cars. Because, like, for it, cars are just things to be dodged. Like, what the hell does a squirrel know about a car? These large moving things that it has to dodge, those annoying, noisy things that might squish it. But it turns out that a car is a place for all the hopes and dreams of the families that drive them to various locations. The squirrel doesn't know this. It can't possibly begin to get there. Well, we philosophers, what we're trying to do is we're at a stage where you're old enough to now reflect on your condition. And then you can turn around and you can inspect the materials out of which the fabric of your human condition is made. And that fabric is interwoven in signs. And it's interwoven in a network of habits where things stand for other things all the time. And you take them for granted. You replace the sign vehicle in the object all the time because you're so trusting that the attorney speaks for the client that you don't even need the client anymore. You can just deal with the attorney. But it's like, no, there's a lot going on there all the time. And sometimes it breaks down, sometimes it doesn't. Curtis, I'm riffing on that theme, my friends. I'm going to end on that note. Does that make any sense or am I crazy? Is this deep or crazy? Because I always wonder from the external, obviously I think it's deep because I work in this and I believe in it. Deep or crazy? John writes, all this Peirce stuff seems crazy until I reflect on it. Made sense to you, John? Terrific, man. I'm loving it. All right, my friends. On that note, this is what philosophy is. I hope you're enjoying this course. And let's just work harder at it. Let's get back to the drawing board. You got to reread your Peirce packets. I can arrange them for you, but the interpretants have to be generated by you. Right? So I've carefully curated the sign vehicles. They stand for an object, but the sign vehicles will only stand for the object if they're properly interpreted. And so engage. Start the semiosis. Start the action of signs. Right? Yeah. And we're going to test whether you got the right habits in the midterm. How do we test whether you know what stands for what in the midterm? All right, my friends, let's say goodbye and see you next week. On that note, I'm also going to make it available. Let me just unblind the Peirce packet. Voila, and the spot for the next entry. Fourth entry spot is now available. Bye, everyone. Curtis, thank you. Reese, take care. Sonia, bye-bye. Have a good week. Hannah, take care. John, have a good week. Keep working hard. Owen, great questions, everyone. Julia, take care. Stephen, Ariana, have an amazing rest of the week as well. You too, Ariana. I really appreciate it. And props to those who are daring enough to jump in the ring and do this, right? So, Nav, good. And use the forum. Use all the tools. Use all of your tools. Be safe. Andrew, take care. Great questions today. Vera, have a nice day too. Bye. On that note, everyone, well done. We had an exciting class again once a day. Today, tying in, as I'm hoping, tying in themes from the epistemology, tying themes from the phaneroscopy that we did last week. You know, this whole idea of qualities contrasting with other qualities so as to give rise to expectations and so on, and how all of that ties in with illusion, reality, trying to figure stuff out, you know, what's going on in our world. So good luck with that. Hopefully it all ties in together. It comes with time. It comes with practice. Next week, we do philosophy of science. We're going to take it to the next level and also talk about the midterm. So just to give you a clear picture of, again, what to expect so that you can come in with at least viable habits and expectations. Good luck, my friends. See you next week.